This is a very awkward setup, but. And like I said. Okay.
So Max, I did see you come in and I did congratulate all the other members and thank them for their service for this year. So thank you so much.
Any others? Or other items you'd like to talk about?
Yes. So I did want to talk about a disability awareness update. And I think during our budget sessions, the school committee had requested an update. And truth be told, we've got a very busy schedule going right through the end of June. And back on May 9th, when appearing before the city council, a resolution was passed actually asking for some similar information. So the resolution from the city council, which was sent to me, signed by a number of councilors, basically is commenting on the disappointment that understanding our differences was eliminated from our budget. They're optimistic to learn about the school committee's decision to maintain inclusion education in our Newton classrooms by restoring partial funding of they're calling it the UOD line item. As pleased as we were to see partial restored funding, we were disheartened to see that there was no requirement for the school department to use all or part of those funds to continue understanding our differences, quality, inclusion programming for Newton students. Since 1975, children with disabilities have been guaranteed equal access to public education. And studies have repeatedly shown that a reduction in stigmas and exclusion by peers yields better educational outcomes for individuals with developmental disabilities. UOD's work is grounded in disability awareness that will lessen these stigmas and exclusions for individuals with disabilities, the impact of which inevitably expands beyond that goal to teach and promote compassion, empathy, and patience for all of their peers and community members. Therefore, and a number of counselors signed on, they are putting forward the following resolution. They strongly encourage the school department to take advantage of UOD's 45 years of experience to ensure thoughtful and compassionate inclusive programming and that it remains in the Newton public school system. Well, again, I talked about this extensively. The Newton public schools, again, we are so appreciative of the many years of service, of understanding our differences. And this is something that we have expanded upon year after year. And you know this just by the conversations about the programming that you have brought back to the district. The many students that may have been educated elsewhere are educated in our classrooms throughout our city. So we are proud of the work that we do each and every day. But I'm going to read a statement that I'm preparing to send to the city council. I think I have a little more time before sending it, but I want to share it and I will make sure you all have copies. Again, this is really in draft form. So we are grateful that the City Council shares our commitment to inclusion and ensuring that all students are treated with dignity and respect. The work championed by the UOD program is aligned with our values as a school system in providing equitable school experiences for everyone every day. This is indeed a vital priority in the Newton Public Schools. It is important to know that despite our budget shortfalls and resulting reductions, Newton Public Schools will sustain curriculum work currently in progress to support disability awareness. This includes a scope and sequence of lessons beginning in kindergarten and extending through 5th grade, which helps students to understand and appreciate the differences in how people engage in everyday life. For example, how people play, communicate, learn, listen, move, etc. This work will complement lessons already being taught that are aligned with the social justice learning standards, a set of anti-bias learning standards with identified age-appropriate learning outcomes. Lessons are designed to build understanding around a variety of aspects of identity. Upon completion of this foundational curriculum work this fall, we will be poised to explore options for valuable supplemental experiences for our students that will enhance their understanding and awareness, including conversations with external vendors and service providers. Our new superintendent, Dr. Anna Nolan, would value the opportunity to learn from the UOD program leadership and find ways to ensure the legacy of the program lives on and does so in a way aligned with the current state of the school system, how to work with vendors, collaborators, and volunteers. So again, it is still in a draft form, but we will be finalizing it and preparing it to send to city council.
Thank you, Kathy. Questions from the members and the students about anything Kathy spoke about in her update? Go ahead, Rajiv.
We've gone through a number of changes with the budget, but I recall the final version did have some funding set aside for disability awareness programming. So what happens to that now?
Well, I believe it's $32,000 that you've set aside. So I think that'll contribute to the curriculum work that is ongoing, reviewing programs. We will keep that aside when we talk about, again, working with vendors or deciding on how we move forward. So I think we need a little more time, before we are going to use that.
So as a follow-up, does this mean that UOD is now off the table for the next academic year?
I'm not going to say for the next academic year, but I do believe probably sometime in early fall, we will start to look at our curriculum, start to implement some of it, and try to figure out ways to, again, include, as we said, some of those parts of the program that are valuable and will enhance what we're doing in our classrooms.
Thanks, Rajiv. All right. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you very much. Let's move on to our consent agenda. We have 4 items up for consideration tonight. They are approval of minutes from December 19th, January 9th, and January 23rd. Decline participation in the school choice for the FY24 school year. Approval of out-of-state field trips as detailed in the memo from Toby Romer, Assistant Superintendent of Secondary Education and Special Programs, and approval of a new gift donation account request as detailed in the memo from Amy Mistro, Director of Business Operations. Does anyone wish to remove an item from the consent agenda?
I do.
Which item would you like
I
to
just
remove?
have questions about the new gift donation account request.
So we will pull that item. I see. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Amy.
We'll pull that item from the consent agenda and take it up momentarily. But prior to that, is there a motion to approve or accept as stated, because not all of them are approvals, accept as stated the consent agenda, removing item number 4, the gift donation policy? Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the consent agenda items as stated with the removal of the gift donation account.
Thank you, Kathy. Is there a second? Thank you. Thank you, Paul. We'll do a roll call vote for the items 1, 2, and 3. Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3 is absent. Ward 4, yes. Ward 5,
Yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
Ward 7,
Yes.
Ward 8,
Yes.
Mayor Fuller.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, everyone. That motion passes 8-0. And Amy Meisner, our Director of Business Operations. Amy, could you give the members a little bit more context about the new gift donation account request that you have before us? Oh, Amy, you're muted.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you tonight. The memo is outlined, as you probably saw in the latest update from our incoming superintendent. She has created an online store in which Newton Public Schools apparel is being sold. There's a couple of different items, and when any revenue from that sale is received by the district, we need an appropriate place to receive those funds. In consultation with the comptroller, it was determined that that should be a gift/donation account, which we will set up if it is the pleasure of the committee, and certainly welcome to answer any specific questions.
Sure. Emily, I imagine you have a question.
I do have a question. Thank you, Amy, for the memo. My question actually has more to do with just the creation of gift/donation accounts. And if that's a practice that we normally do, I was kind of remember conversations about revolving accounts and what that what does that mean, and trying to step away from the revolving account concept. And so I'm curious to know Because do we have gift accounts already, or is this the first one that we're creating? I'm just curious.
We do have gift accounts. We have multiple different gift accounts. Our first thought was that we might do a revolving account, and speaking with the comptroller, there are very specific guidelines for revolving accounts. So we need another type of municipal account into which the funds can be received. And it's his recommendation that it should be this gift donation account.
Okay. That answers my question. Thank you.
Okay.
Emily, Mayor Fuller, go ahead.
At what point, when do we talk about the use of the funds that are going into this account? On the city side, if you're setting up an account like this and gifts are going in, usually we understand at the beginning what the use is of the funds.
So Amy, is there anything within the memo, and I understand this is working in consultation with our incoming superintendent. So do you have any thoughts that you can share with us as relayed through Anna, Dr. Nolan?
I have not worked with Dr. Nolan directly on this. I have worked with Julie McDonough, who has worked to set up the account with X-Grain. It is my understanding from the articulated memo that Dr. Nolan sent to the community that she plans to use the funds to support community engagement events.
That was my recollection as well.
Parents and family caregiving engagement opportunities.
Yep. And I'm sure she'd be willing to come and give us even more vision of or more idea of what her vision around these funds could be. But any other questions from the members? Okay, is there a motion? Go ahead.
I'd like to move to follow the lead of the 3 Natick people mentioned to create the new gift donation account request.
All
You
right.
can take out the notification.
I will rephrase it. Were you motioning to approve the new gift donation account request?
Yes.
Thank you. So there is a motion to approve. Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, Cove. We'll now do a roll call vote. Any other questions before we do that? No. All right, Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3 is absent, Ward 4, yes, Ward 5,
Yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
Ward 7,
Yes.
Ward 8.
Yes.
Mayor Fuller.
Yes,
All right, that motion passes unanimously. Thanks for jumping on, Amy. We appreciate it. Continuing on to items for discussion and update. The first item on tonight's agenda is an update to our wellness guidelines. Here we will be joined, I think, Ruth Hoshino. Okay. Ruth Hoshino, Director of School Health Services. Are there others? There were others on the memo. Okay. Shannon Kamal, perhaps. Interim K-8 curriculum coordinator for physical education, health and wellness. And of course, Amy Mistro, Director of Business Operations. Welcome, everyone. And Jill Murray Grady, General Counsel.
Hi. I just want to, I don't have much to say substantively because the professionals that are on virtually did all the work. But just to give an idea of what's going on, the process is, it says wellness guidelines, but we're also talking about small tweaks to the actual policy, which is what needs to go before the school committee for a vote. So tonight's just going to be a first introduction and reading. You should have it redlined, as well as changes that were made to the guidelines that go with the policy that are implemented by the administration, essentially. So I just wanted to give a big overall picture. And I know Amy wrote a very thorough and precise, the same time memo as to what prompted these changes, but I'm going to turn it over to them. And we did bring it to the policy subcommittee. Well, Kathy Shields was able to join in the process as well before we brought it here today.
Great. Thank you. Please take it away. Amy, Shannon, and Ruth.
Thanks so much, Tamika. Thank you for reviewing the policy with us tonight. We have been working on this for several months to just capture some of what is described in the memo for the public who might be watching with us tonight. The USDA Food and Nutrition Services articulates guidelines for the local wellness policy. Within the final rule, which was passed in 2016, which is an update to the Healthy, Hungry, Free Kids Act of 2010, Policies are required to have specific goals for nutrition promotion and education, physical activity, and other school-based activities. Standard nutrition guidelines for all food and beverages sold to students on the school campus, which are consistent with federal regulations for school meal nutrition standards and smart snacks in school nutrition standards. Standards for all food and beverages provided but not sold to students during the school day. So for things like classroom parties or classroom snacks. Policies for food and beverage marketing that allow marketing and advertising of only those foods and beverages that meet the smart snacks and school nutrition standards, and a description of public involvement, public updates, policy leadership, and an evaluation plan. This happens through a required triennial assessment, which was last done in, it was last due on June 30th of 20. There's been several extensions during COVID, and the requirement is to have this done by 6/30/23. So we're coming up on that. And we've hopefully done all of our work to prepare people to feel comfortable with the changes that we're recommending. The major requirements of the triennial assessment are that each district must perform an assessment of our current policy through the WellSat 3.0 is the suggested tool, and we've included both the scorecard and the assessment tool in the materials tonight. Share the results of the local wellness policy assessment with the public, which we're doing through this duly posted school committee meeting, and have a local wellness policy reflective of any recommended changes approved as of 6/30/23, which is included in your packet tonight with both the red line version and a clean version of the guidelines, which we have tagged in the policy, and then just the very few red line edits that we're recommending for the policy itself. As I said, this work has been done in conjunction with Ruth Hashino and Shannon Cuomo for several months. We have brought this forward to, we started with Toby Romer, then we went to Joe Murray Grady. We went to the Wellness Committee. We met with the Wellness Policy, and we're bringing it forward for your review tonight. Overall, the policy reflects really just a strengthening of very specific language that the federal government is recommending. There were really no major substantive changes, which we were pleased to see. And it's just aligning our really current practice with the specific language that they're requiring. As you can see, if you look in detail at the Wellness 3.0 scorecard or assessment tool, the way to rate both the guidelines and the policies, they rate each standard by either a 0, 1, or 2, and there's quite a bit of specificity required to reach a 2. And so that's how we approach the process to try to be as compliant as possible and also reflective of practice within Newton. So with that, that's a general overview, and certainly we are open to any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Amy. Any questions from the members? Go ahead, Paul.
I'm wondering whether our standard for 20 minutes for lunch and 15 minutes for recess is based on the nutritional and physical needs of the children versus the constraints we've imposed on ourselves in the elementary school day.
Would you like me to respond to that? I think the schedule is certainly puts a lot of pressure on lunchtime. I actually was at the Brown Middle School today, working with 3 of their civics classes who had excellent questions about the food service program. And at the end of the time with them, I asked them for their feedback that I can bring back to try to incorporate certainly constructive criticism. And that was one of the topics that the kids brought up, is that the lunch time period is tight between getting to class, getting in, getting food, sitting down to eat, and moving on to the next thing. It certainly does create some pressure for some kids more than others. Some kids are very fast. Some kids take a little bit more time. It certainly is a component of time on learning, which we have to manage within the school day.
Thank you, Paul. Other questions or comments? Go ahead, Rajiv.
I was part of the discussion on these proposed changes as part of the wellness committee. So a couple of comments. I do think we need to approve these because they will bring us back in line with what's expected and required by the government. One of the interesting things here is the addition of guidelines for snacks that parents can bring into class. Apparently, this doesn't apply, we think, to snacks sold during voting in elections. So you can still pick up your brownie if you so choose. But there are changes. Some of this may apply to what's in a vending machine or what's allowed in the vending machine. There is a carve out, if I remember correctly, for the Tiger Loft to be able to sell coffee, which is what keeps Newton North running. But these are not just surface changes. I think there is some meat behind them, so to speak, that we'll have to think through, and the team on the screen will have to make sure is implemented. But that said, they bring us in line with where we should be.
Thanks for that comment, Rajiv. All right, well, thank you very much to Amy, Shannon, and Ruth, and Jill, you as well. I imagine this will be on our agenda following meeting.
Yeah,
for a vote.
meeting will be up, the policy will be up for a vote.
Right, okay. All right, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, up next, we have a review of the Underwood-Ward mission statement and guiding principles. For this, I will turn Hurley, Assistant Superintendent, Chief Financial and Administrative Officer, Stephanie Gilman, Director of Planning, Project Management and Sustainability, and Aisha Farag, Assistant Superintendent of Elementary Education. Welcome. And thank you in advance.
Thank you. I'm just going to start this off. So we have before you a draft mission statement as part of our Underwood-Ward planning process. We've been talking to you folks for quite some time about this. We've kicked this process off. We've got Perkins Eastman on board, and we've started some, so we've already had a number of meetings already. Aisha and Stephanie are doing a great job. We've actually had Katie Hogue has been intimately involved as well in terms of the enrollment. There's a lot to this. This is going to be a challenging process for us. I think the key that we want to do is just to make sure this is really an inclusive process. Include the community, include all the stakeholders, bring you folks all up to speed, and then ultimately make some recommendations. There's a lot there. I think the couple of the key pieces here is really kind of a three components that we're looking at, not just one. Certainly the enrollment fee piece, and there's going to be questions about enrollment. There's going to be questions about enrollment. What's it going to be like in 50 years? And we don't always know. We don't know. We're going to try and take our best estimate in terms of what these are going to be. Really critically is obviously the facility conditions of the buildings. They're both nearing 100 years old. They lack a lot of the space we would have in our more modern buildings. And then thirdly, and probably really the most important is the educational program, the educational impact on our students in these buildings. We're looking at the programming that we've got there now and comparing it to what we've got with their newer buildings. And there's certainly going to be a number of areas for improvement. So Aisha, Stephanie, chime in on this, but ultimately not now, but I think we were looking to have you folks take a vote on kind of approving the mission statement, which just kind of outlines kind of what we're looking to do with this process. If there's changes or adds you want to make to that, we certainly are happy to incorporate that. But Aisha, Stephanie, chime in.
No, I just wanted to say we've, as it mentions in the memo, we've met with the task force twice, so they've reviewed the document, and we also had a meeting with the Underwood staff and the Underwood staff together as well, and talked through these points that are in the mission statement, and also with the Ward families at their PTO meeting last Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have another meeting coming up in June 6th with the Underwood families.
Thank you. And so I should also give Rajiv and Kathy an opportunity to contribute your thoughts. You're the school committee members who are on the Ward Underwood working group, or we call task force. Yes. So if you have any thoughts you'd like to contribute, and we'll open it up for questions after that.
I don't have anything I want to add.
Okay.
It's an early stage. The two meetings have been really well run, productive, and I think very inclusive. So broad involvement from the community, from the teachers, the principals. So I think we're on a good track, and the consultants have been very involved and engaged, which has been nice to see. So still early days and a lot more to do.
And our facilities guru,
So I'm actually on the task force also.
facilities guru slash
Fine.
task force member. Go ahead, Emily Brennan.
Project 5. So no, I just also wanted to say that I think that I have also been at the meetings, the task force meetings, but I've also had an opportunity to sit in at the PTO meetings as well as at the staff meetings. And really going through, I think, a lot of very informative, thoughtful exercises that was run by Aisha in terms of what the strengths and the challenges, both from the building perspective and from the educational program perspective and from the enrollment perspective. And I thought that was really, really informative and helpful and interesting, and how similar the answers were, even though they're different communities looking at things from different perspectives. I thought that was incredibly helpful, and is going to help inform our work going forward. So,
Thank you, Emily. Questions? Go ahead, Paul.
Thanks for what you're doing on this. I think it's really well organized and thoughtful. And I just wanted to raise an issue. Our focus clearly has to be on the students and the faculty and the families, but there's a citywide issue here as well. And I assume that, or should I assume that at some point in this process, we'll hear from the city as to how the different kinds of proposals would impact other things that are city priorities. For example, traffic patterns around those schools or other schools should students end up in different places. Also potential reuse of sites if sites are freed up from their academic purposes as to what might go there and how that might fit in with other priorities, housing and other priorities of the city. So just a thought, thinking as a city planner, that I would hope that the city could contribute their thoughts on those matters as this goes along as well.
Go ahead, Mayor Fuller. and then
I'm
Kathy.
very grateful to the way that the city and NPS are already working together, and those voices are right at the table right from the beginning. So I don't think there's any lag effect about talking about them. There are lots of stakeholders here, including lots of neighbors who live near these schools who may not have children in the schools right now, but care a lot about traffic patterns and use of buildings when if they weren't elementary schools. So we'll make sure that all our urban planners and our transportation planners and all those imaginings are with everybody every step of the way.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Fuller.
One more question.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Paul.
I know we have this scheduled for December, and usually we get a presentation and then at the next meeting would vote. And I'm mainly concerned that if the presentation is late in December, that Kathy wouldn't be around to vote on all the work she's put into this if it's the last meeting in December, and losing that institutional knowledge, I think would be a shame. So if she wants to vote on this, I'm wondering if it could be scheduled for early December so that there could be the meeting and then the vote before the end of the year.
I'll just say there, before I cede it to you, Kathy, there will be a loss of a lot of institutional knowledge across the board for my colleague who will be stepping down. Go ahead, Kathy.
So there were, I wanted to respond to the questions you asked first, and then with respect to scheduling, I think we'll get it done as soon as we can. I mean, it's a process that I imagine, like the Bigelow process, will be iterative in that there will be community meetings and there will be some recommendations and refinements of recommendations. So by the time it comes to us, we'll need to have adequate time for all of that to happen. And if we can get it done sooner than the very end of December, great. But if not, someone will take my spot and we'll be fully confident to vote on this matter. I guess going back to the two questions you asked though. So in terms of development of potential options, the task force is nowhere near that stage yet. There's a lot of work we have to do before we get to the options stage. But I expect that when we get there, we will be involving groups from the transportation department and Safe Routes to School. And that when we come up with an evaluation matrix for the options we're able to present, that some of those evaluation criteria will be things like walkability and impact on traffic and transportation. So rest assured that that will all get taken into account in the option development phase of this work. When at the task force meeting, so what happens if if there is surplus property question was asked? We have 2 city councilors on our task force. And I'll just give you the answer that one of them gave, which is that this group does not have the authority to determine what happens to that property. Rather, should we make a recommendation and should the school committee accept it that renders one of those buildings essentially surplus property, there's a committee of the city council called the Real Property Reuse Committee that will then look at that question and determine and make recommendations about how that property should be best used in the future. That's my understanding.
Thanks, Kathy. Go ahead, Mayor Fuller.
Your understanding is exactly correct. There's one step before that, which is actually the school committee / school department has control of these buildings. So first of all, the school committee and the school department would think, that this elementary school community is moving out, but perhaps we have another need for it even within here before turning to the city council and saying, we NPS don't need this building anymore, and moving it over to the city council, which stays in close touch with neighborhoods as they make decisions.
So thank you both. Hold thought. Very briefly, go ahead. I'll be mindful of time better today.
Okay, just quickly, which is in terms of timing, ideally, I don't want to say we have to, but we really have to be done and by this decision by December for a number of reasons, not just because Kathy will be leaving us, but because it's part of a larger process. If there are short-term solutions and longer-term solutions, short-term solutions, like we need to decide what they are before we do kindergarten, and then that's part of a larger process with the student assignment working group, because Lincoln Elliott's going to be coming online. So there's a much broader citywide process that this is part of, which is why we're really pushing for that December date.
Thank you very much. And I think you all said more elegantly what I would have said, which is let's not put the cart before the horse. But again, you've all said a much more thorough version of that. Thank you, Aisha. Thank you, Liam. Thank you, Stephanie, for bringing this to us and for us to have this first read and first review of your work. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Okay, and up next, we are ticking right along, is our AP analysis review that we didn't have sufficient time to take up during our last meeting. Once again, I apologize very much to Katie Hoag for the delay in her presentation. And as of course, Katie Hoag is NPS's Director of Data Analysis and Enrollment Planning. Toby Romer, Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Education, is joining her. And I'm not quite sure if anyone else.
Henry and Tammy.
Henry Turner and Tammy Strauss, respectively, Newton North and Newton South principals. There they are.
Can I just make a comment
Yes, of
before we
course.
start? And thank you. Yes, this was a presentation from a couple of weeks ago. And again, we have continued to work to refine. But we are going to be presenting the data today. We're going to try to answer as many of the thoughtful additional questions offered by school committee members at the end of our last meeting, particularly those related to explaining and analyzing the data related to AP scores. We know there's been a lot of discussion in the community about scores that are reported on our school and district profiles. And this is a great opportunity for people to have a full understanding of what the scores mean and how we support our students' preparation for post-secondary education. However, some of the educational questions asked will require a full presentation, and we recommend this in the fall with high school department heads, school leaders. Right now, our department heads are in the busiest time of year. And I will tell you, I related this to probably one of the best presentations we had this year, and we've had many. excellent presentations, but we had our guidance staff in here from both Newton North and Newton South High School. We had our principals available, many different members that make up the guidance staff, and really shared with us all of the different tenants from the guidance department supporting our students and sharing that information with you. So we are hopeful that we'll be able to do something similar like that to answer some of the questions that might not be answered tonight. So we could have a deeper dive into AP programs and specific subjects, or the educational work that is being done to support increased access and success in AP courses, including enrollment practices, supporting structures for all students, and how we analyze the data and use it to support the work. We can rely again on, our chair and new superintendent to plan a presentation that meets everybody's needs, hopefully in the fall. So we're happy this evening that, again, Dr. Hoag and Assistant Superintendent Roma are joined by our high school principals. Thank you.
Great. Well, it's nice to be here with everybody tonight in person. I'm gonna talk through most of the presentation, and then Toby and Henry and Tammy are here to answer questions that I might not be able to answer. So, sorry, this is not my computer. Thank you. All right, so there's a lot of content in the report that we provided. I'm going to start tonight by talking through some of the key points that were made in the report, and then we'll talk about them in a little bit more detail. So many factors related to AP course enrollment and exam taking have changed over the past 3 years in Newton. Work to increase access to AP courses in Newton has been a focus in recent years. And we've seen enrollment in AP courses increasing starting in 2021 to 22 for all students, specifically in 12th grade. The exam performance on APs has shifted from a relatively stable pattern. That shift began in 2019 to 20, where we saw an increased percentage of students scoring a 1 or a 2 on AP exams in the past 3 years. We've also seen AP exam participation decreasing among 12th graders beginning in the 19 to 20 school year. The shift in the high school schedule, which has required revised course pacing and activity design, has likely impacted exam scores, as has COVID. We've also seen that final course grade in AP courses is positively related to AP exam scores for those who take the test, and that the population of students who are not taking the AP exam has shifted to one of more students receiving an A or a B beginning in 2019 and 20. So just to give a quick overview of what advanced placement is, Newton offers AP courses and administers College Board sponsored AP exams. The AP course curriculum and the exam content are managed by the College Board. The courses are taught by our staff who follow the required AP curriculum. The number of AP courses taught in MPS has increased in recent years with the addition of environmental science and 3D design courses. The full list is in the report. Students who are in our AP courses in Newton have the option to take the College Board exam at the end of the year. This exam is separate from the course assessments and course grades from the NPS teachers that get listed on the students' transcripts. And then finally, some colleges and universities provide college credit or placement when students arrive at college based on their AP exam scores. So the table that's on this slide is showing the AP score along with the College Board recommendation for what that score means, and then the College Board's description of the college course grade equivalent for that score. So students who receive a score of 5, the College Boards would say that they're extremely well qualified in that subject to receive a college course grade equivalent of an A+ or an A. There are various data sources that are used in the report. The DESE school and district profile data displays the data for AP exam takers. This is the publicly available data on the DESE website. It does not show students who are enrolled in AP classes who do not take the exam, and it does include self-study students who are not enrolled in an AP course in NPS who take the exam independently. Our internal data allows for analysis of enrollment, exam participation, and course grades for students who are enrolled in AP courses in Newton. The score distribution graphs in the report use the DESE data, which includes all Newton exam takers. And then the graphs that show enrollment rates, AP exam participation, and course grades use our own data. So this slide is looking at students who we're calling self-study students. So again, these are the students who take the AP exams in Newton, but are not enrolled in an AP course. The two graphs here look at the total number of self-study exams by year, as well as the percentage of self-study exams by year. We've had a relatively consistent percentage of AP self-study exam takers, with the exception of 2021. You can see in 2021, there was a large percentage increase of students or self-study exams that were taken in Newton. That's due to a decrease in the total exams taken in that year, as well as a small increase in the number of self-study exams taken. This is likely related to COVID during that school year. So one of the things that has changed in Newton has been access to and enrollment in AP courses. The district has focused on expanding access to AP courses over the past 10 years. This work was done based on data indicating a disproportionate enrollment for specific student groups in Newton AP courses. Beginning in the 1920 school year, NPS worked to reduce unnecessary prerequisites for many AP courses. These were prerequisites that were determined to not be necessary to access content in the course. And these included supplemental placement tests, summer participation requirements, grade minimums, and other additional steps for enrollment for students. Most of our AP courses do retain prior course requisites that are necessary to successfully engage in the course content. The changes that were implemented in Newton were designed to address the data indicating that specific prerequisites for courses can perpetuate disproportionate enrollment, as well as research indicating that participation in an AP course and the exam, regardless of the score that a student receives, results in significantly stronger college outcomes for students compared to students who did not participate in AP courses. So when we look at AP enrollment by student grade level in Newton, the graphs on this slide are looking at the percentage of students by grade who completed at least one AP course on the left. And on the right, we're showing the number of AP enrollments by grade level and year. So you can see the graph on the left that looks at the percentage of students completing at least one AP course. The blue line is looking at students in grade 12. The green line is students in grade 11. The yellow line is students in grade 10, and red is students in grade 9. So you can see that we've had relatively stable enrollment for students in grades 9, 10, and 11, while we've seen an increase for students in grade 12. You can also see this then in the graph on the right, which is looking at the number of AP enrollments by grade level and year. Again, blue is grade 12, where you see there's an increase, while the green is grade 11, where it's been relatively stable. The graphs on this slide are looking at AP enrollment by particular demographics. The graph on the left is looking at AP enrollment for students by race and ethnicity and school year. And the graph on the right is looking at AP enrollment by student eligibility for free or reduced price lunch. We've seen an increase in the enrollment rate for all of our racial ethnic subgroups, as well as students eligible for free or reduced price lunch in Newton in recent years, although enrollment gaps continue to persist for these groups of students. The graph on this slide is looking at AP exam performance from 2013 to 2022, so last year's AP tests. As I mentioned earlier, AP exams are scored from 1 through 5 by the College Board based on their recommendation for receiving college credit and placement. Scores of 3 through 5 result in a qualified recommendation from the College Board. A score of 2 results in a possibly qualified recommendation, and a 1 results in no recommendation from the College Board. Beginning in 2019 to 20, the pattern of our AP scores in Newton has shifted with an increased percentage of students scoring a 1 or a 2 over the past 3 years. So this graph is the gray line at the top is showing the percentage of students scoring a 3 through 5 on all AP exams that were taken in that year. And the blue line is looking at the percentage scoring a 1 or a 2. When we look at the same graph for self-study students, again, here, the gray at the top is looking at the percentage of students scoring a 3 to a 5, and the blue is looking at the percentage of students scoring a 1 or a 2. We see that self-study students saw a similar shift in exam performance to students who were enrolled in AP courses in Newton in 2022. And I just wanted to note that that is the year that we saw the percentage of self-study exams return to typical levels. So that's not the year where we saw a large increase in self-study exams. So this graphs on this slide are looking at Newton course completers by their AP exam score. So this is looking at our internal data. The graph on the left is looking at the number of students or course enrollments, really, because students may be enrolled in more than one course. So it's looking at the number of course completers by their AP exam score over the past 5 years. So you can see that overall numbers of course completers have increased. The blue bar at the top is looking at the number of course completers who did not take the exam. So that section or that number of students has increased over the past 5 years. The graph on the right is looking at the percentage of AP course completers by their exam score. Again, the blue at the top is looking at the percentage of students who did not take the exam. So we can see the percentage of students who did not take the exam has increased over the past 3 years. This graph is looking again at exam participation in a slightly different way. So we're looking at the percentage of students enrolled in an AP course who took the exam by grade level. As we've mentioned, participation in the exam is not required for Newton students, unlike many of our comparison districts around us. And as we mentioned before, many colleges and universities have begun limiting their practices of accepting AP coursework and exam scores for college credit. The graph here shows that exam participation has shifted for 12th graders in Newton beginning in 2019 to 20. In the past 3 years, around 2/3 of our 12th graders now take the exam, compared to 85 to 90% prior to that. So who are these students who are not taking the exam? The graph here is looking at the distribution of the final course grades, so their grade in their AP course in Newton for students who did not take the AP exam over the past 5 years. The light blue line is the percentage of students who received an A in the course. The purple is the percentage of students who received a B. The peach is the percentage who received a C. And then the blue is percentage receiving a D, and the brown is a P. So beginning in 2019 to 20, over half of the non-exam takers received an A in their AP course. So that's a shift from the 2 prior years. And around 90% of non-AP exam takers received an A or a B in the course in Newton. And although not shown on this graph, in recent years, students receiving an A or a B in their courses in Newton were more likely to score a 3, 4, or a 5 on the exam. So in terms of actual numbers of exams, this is 550 exams in 2020 and 2022 that we're not taking, where students scored an A or a B, compared to 200 to 300 exams in 2018 or 19. So where did these 12th grade students who did not take the exam enroll after high school? Around 40% of our students who don't take the exams in 12th grade enroll in a post-secondary institution that is on the US News top 50 national universities or top 50 national liberal arts colleges. Specifically for the 12th graders who did not take the exam in 2021, which is the most recent year where we have National Student Clearinghouse data for students, so where they actually enrolled versus where they told us they were enrolling. We've listed out the institutions where those students were most likely to enroll. So we had 40 students in grade 12 who didn't take the AP exams who enrolled at UMass Amherst, 14 students at UVM, 14 students at BU, 12 students at Northeastern, 11 students at Harvard, 11 students at Tufts, and 10 students at UMass Lowell. So this graph pulls these three pieces together, looking at our exam scores over the past 5 years in gray at the top. This is the percentage of students scoring a 3 to 5. The orange dotted line is looking at the percentage of seniors who took the exam in each school year. And the purple dotted line is looking at the percentage of seniors who completed at least one AP course. So our shift in scores started, or the shifts in all three of these factors started in 2020. In 2020, we saw the percentage of seniors completing at least one AP course start to begin increasing. So that's that increased access. The percentage of seniors taking the exam also started to decrease in that year. And that's also when we began to see a slight shift in exam score patterns that continued over the next 2 years. So what's happening with our current AP students? So one benefit of pushing this report to the next meeting was that we were able to put out a survey to our current AP students who are taking the exams now or just took them to find out what's happening with them. So this survey is still active, but right now we have, or earlier today, we had 1,022 responses. So we're asking students who are enrolled in AP courses what they're doing with their exams. So of 1,022 students in grade 12 who are enrolled in AP courses in Newton, 129 reported that they didn't register for the AP exam in that course at all, and 42 have canceled their exam registration that they made in the fall. So that's 17% of the students responding. This is still active, so we'll get more information as kids continue to respond. For the students who didn't register for their exam at all, the majority of them said that they didn't want to. Some of them said this was because of stress or pressure related to the exam. Many also said they would not get AP credit in college for the test. And then others said that they didn't want to pay the fee for that particular exam. For those who canceled their exam, the majority of them said their college that they had been accepted into would not accept AP scores for credit. One of the questions that was brought up at the last meeting was about comparing our results to comparison or peer districts. As noted in the report, the majority of the districts we would typically compare ourselves to have different policies around access to AP courses, as well as AP exam taking. So that's on page 5 of the report. These are two key variables that impact AP scores. Limiting access to AP courses limits the exam taking population, and requiring AP exam participation also limits the exam taking population. This makes comparing our exam scores to these districts difficult as the exam taking populations are different. So we did not include them in this presentation. So to pull this all together, the efforts that we've been engaged in recent years to increase access to AP courses are resulting in increased enrollments for all students. The population of our students who participate on the AP exams has changed beginning in 2019 to 20, with a reduction in the number of 12th graders who participate. And again, this is likely due to the timing of the exam and 12th graders being into college, or many being into college at that point, and shifts in the practices of colleges and universities in accepting these scores. Many of these 12th graders who did not participate in the AP exams have received an A or a B in their AP course, which is related to higher exam scores for Newton students who do take the exam. And as I just mentioned, exam participation requirements and or prerequisites for enrollment remain unchanged in many comparison districts, which makes comparing our results difficult. And then finally, the shift in schedules at the high school has required adjustments to the timing and the implementation of the rigid AP curricula, which are still being worked on. And COVID also likely plays a role in the scores that we saw. Students who are taking the tests, the AP tests in 2021 and 2022 were beginning their high school career during the pandemic. So finally, how is this data being used to inform practice now in our buildings? Instructional leaders are continuing to review their AP course and exam results in each department and refine the supports that are in place to ensure that all students who are enrolled in AP courses are able to be successful in their courses and assessments. Departments are looking at their specific course data to analyze patterns and results to identify supports for individual students and courses as a whole. And teacher teams and instructional leaders are continuing to evaluate adjustments to the implementation of the AP curricula because of the new schedule, which are being reevaluated and further updated in each course. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that's a good summary, and I know Henry and Tammy and I are happy to answer questions about some of the instructional components of what you presented.
Thank you, Katie. Just speaking for myself, I'm I'm happy that there was a silver lining in terms of gathering that small piece of student feedback in terms of the survey because of the delay in having your presentation. Opening it up for questions now from the members, and Max, if you'd like to ask a question, feel free. Rajiv, for you.
I was offering the mic.
Oh, all right. Questions? Go ahead, Cove.
I have a few questions. Thank you for all of that. I just wanted to, what is the cost of each test? About
Henry, yeah, do you have it?
$90?
90.
Okay. So, you know, it is a significant, and do we pay ever for student tests?
Tammy, do you want to talk about that process?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so it's about 93 something. But yes, if we have students in need, we each have our own funds for a student in need, and we happily pay out of those to ensure that kids have access to the test.
Okay, thanks. I figured that was the case, but I just wanted to highlight that as well. I guess, so I'm personally very torn about AP tests. It's something that I think about a lot. I think that it's interesting that the role I feel of AP tests have changed in education. When I was in school, it was to get that credit or to at least to get that bump up. Now it has become kind of a de facto, it is the honors course. It is the thing, it's become, you know, in some ways, the one thing that you can measure across the country, the scores on something, almost like we don't have a national curriculum. So this is the one thing that we can compare with other states, with other places. But obviously that's had a kind of an adverse, you know, now we don't know, students aren't taking the tests because they're into college and they don't need to. It is stressful, you know, these things. So, but I think at the same time, like, I don't know that that's the best curriculum and AP course is the best way to learn certain topics. But it is what we have. And it is a very standards, for lack of a better term, based curriculum, very rigid, as you've said. So I think that what I would want to know is if we are going to teach these AP courses and kids are not going to take the test or whatever, how do we compare how they've mastered that curriculum? Because no matter what curriculum we're taking, we want to know that they've mastered it, regardless of if they take the test, if they don't take the test. So, you know, that's one thing I think I'm concerned about. I think that we, you know, maybe there's other ways to say, you know, did they master the content of the course if they don't take the test, you know, and I guess that's the grading, you know, but to report on that, because I think what I wouldn't want to see is that kids are taking these classes because they look good initially on the college application, but then they're not doing well in the class because we're not providing the support that they need to do well in the class. So I guess that leads me to kind of my next question, which is what supports are we offering people in the class? Are there after school programs, extra help, time during wind block? What are we doing to support students who are taking these classes who may be struggling?
So I'll give a little bit of an answer to that. Katie, I don't know if you want to add anything from your perspective. And I know Henry and Tammy have a lot of good specific examples that'll help maybe illustrate some of parts of your questions. But I do think, you know, we mentioned the curriculum and that it is tightly prescribed, and we need to be following that for AP courses to prepare students for the exams. Many private and independent schools have moved away from AP courses entirely and have moved more towards other advanced honors coursework that they have a lot more educational control over, and they're able to adapt it more to the needs of their students, the interests of their students, while still maintaining sort of a college level rigor to it, which is the goal of these courses as well. So it's helpful to see that example. That's not something we've considered here, but it's definitely something.
Well, and it would be my personal preference, but it's not where I think that a lot of families and a lot of people are looking for that AP credential.
So related to that, and I can let Henry and Tammy talk about this. In addition to our AP courses, we've developed at both schools, a number of advanced and independent courses that anecdotally from our work with our school counselors and college admissions reps are actually really, really helpful in helping to distinguish candidates from others, in that the AP has become sort of the coin of the realm, and everybody's taking an AP and everybody's doing well and at both grades and test wise. Some of these other unique opportunities for more advanced study that we have at both Newton North and Newton South have been really helpful. Kids have loved it. They're more tailored to the specific interests and expertise of students and the expertise of our faculty. And Henry and Tammy can give some examples of those, as well as some of the ways that we're supporting students. I think the last thing I'll say is just underscoring the importance of that research around access to these college level rigorous courses that are represented through AP or these independent opportunities are correlated to student success in secondary education, regardless of their AP exam score. So we feel really strongly that the gained access is of added value, regardless of the exam outcomes. Not that we don't aspire for high exam outcomes, but that's what part of what's driving this. You want to add anything to that, Katie? Henry or Tammy, do you want to talk about both some of those advanced courses we offer outside of AP, as well as support for students entering into AP courses?
Sure. So some of those courses that we have outside of AP that are really now what colleges are looking at across both schools. We have neurobio, we have modern physics, quantum mechanics. Those are just some examples, computer science principles that I know both schools offer. Those are the ones that colleges are now looking at, as opposed to those traditional AP courses like biology, chemistry, et cetera. And we're lucky that we have the ability to offer those. In addition to that, just to answer your initial question in terms of what support there is, everything that you mentioned, right? Before school, after school, during wind blocks, all of the above is accurate. That's exactly what our teachers do, because the AP curricula is extremely dense. We only have, I used to be an AP bio teacher. We only have this much time to get this much work done. For me as a teacher many moons ago, I used to come in on Saturdays to help the kids, and our teachers do what they need to do to ensure that they're getting through that curriculum. That's really why the huge advantage of the schedule that we have with the wind blocks. Teachers have the ability to do that during the school day. So that's just some of the ways that we help our students. But of course, they're also there in the morning. They're also there after school. If the kids need anything, kids have access to the teachers to ensure that they're getting those grades in class. When you talked about the concern of how do we know these kids are doing well? We have in-school assessments, whether they're formative assessments that happen ongoing, or whether those AP classes are doing their own kind of assessments. Like even now with the AP exams over, our teachers are still assessing. They may not look traditional. They may not look like a paper and pencil test, but learning happens in many forms. And that's exactly what's going on right now. Henry, I'm sure you have something to add.
Yeah, I'd also just say that it's important to remember that a lot of schools consider AP higher than honors classes. And that's never been the case in our schools, that AP are considered honors classes. So students and what colleges routinely tell students, the most competitive colleges, is that you want to take the most rigorous classes in your school. And so for a lot of our students, they are attracted to honors courses that are not necessarily AP courses. So I think just to clarify that. Secondly is that the AP courses are very content driven and packed. And so I used to teach AP US history, and it's heavily content driven and memorization focused. And so what a lot of schools do will have US history earlier in high school, say 9th grade US history, and then in 11th grade, kids could take the AP. We do 2 years of world history. And so for a course like APUSH, is that we're really jamming a lot of curriculum, whereas we have many students are not getting that early American history content, but it's very content driven. So that's sort of just like the content nature of it, I think is important to also remember, which is different than a lot of our honors courses teach. In terms of the assessments, you asked about sort of how to prepare students when they're struggling, and then the assessment. So I know that I did this 15 years ago when I was teaching AP US, is that we would get at the AP retreat, we would get sample AP tests or old AP tests, and then I would take those questions and use them to assess students in my test in class. And I know that happens in a lot of our classes now. So the question of like, how do we know that they're prepared for the AP is that teachers are using those questions in their exams over the course of the year. And there are some surprises, like in U.S. history, the document-based question is the surprise question. There's some others that you don't know, but you can prepare for how to strategize around the assessment. And I know that teachers do that. So I know that all of our teachers do a lot of will do some like test strategy taking in class. And then additionally is that, there are your typical win blocks or other ways in which we support students when they're struggling in a class. I also know that there's a lot of review sessions that happen early or closer to the exam, so that students are getting, the reminders of some of the content from earlier in the year or in previous courses.
Yeah, and I think that that's great. I mean, I think what I was getting at with assessing how well the students are prepared for the test if they're not going to take the test is something that that those teachers might want to be collecting, and so that we can add that to the conversation as we're looking at these scores. And I think I'll just say one thing about the supports. Lots of the supports you mentioned are all obviously, seem all voluntary for students. And I wonder, I know I work in a school that has the equivalent of a win block, and sometimes students come and sometimes students don't go. So I think that like making sure that students maybe who are struggling have like a more formal support, might be something that I would suggest, so that we know that it's not just the motivated students that are going to the optional things.
That's really good. That's really good feedback. Sorry, if I could just clarify one thing, just a reminder, our win blocks are not optional for students. And so students sign up for them, but also teachers can sign up the student as well. So if they know that they are struggling, they can sign them up. So it's a different process for us. So I think just wanted to clarify that. But I think the feedback is good in terms of collecting that data and also making sure that we're continuing to push in to support students when they're struggling.
Thank you, Cove. Other questions from the members? Go ahead, Rajiv, and then Max. Go ahead.
One data question for you, Katie. I know Newton is a test center. So the students who aren't enrolled in AP courses, are they necessarily NPS students, or could they be private school students who just happen to take an AP test here?
So the data that we reported, it would be only Newton students. I actually don't know if a private school student could take the test in Newton. They could, according to Lisa, yes. But the data that we're reporting in this report is for Newton students,
including
enrolled in Newton schools.
Got it. So including the ones who are not enrolled in AP classes, who self-studied and took the test. Okay, correct. Thank you. That's helpful. So that's how you break it out. Got it. Thank you. That's helpful. So there seem to be two takeaways that I wanted to validate. So one is we seem to have done a good job increasing access, especially to previously or still currently underrepresented groups of students. So a question I think for Tammy and Henry and possibly you, Toby, is we've increased the access. What are we doing and what can we continue to do to support success in the classes, once they're enrolled? So that's one question. The other interesting insight was that the students who don't take the test for whatever reason, by and large, seem to be doing quite well. So we're actually losing on good AP grades and reporting of those because they choose not to take the test. And I don't know that we want to be requiring it like peer districts, but that definitely seems to be a downward drag on, say, the average AP score. Is it reasonable to make that interpretation?
You want to answer that part of it? We can talk about what.
Sure. I mean, yeah, I think, again, we're saying that the students who did not take the tests generally received A's and B's, and those A's and B's are related to higher exam scores on average, not for every student, right? So we're making an extrapolation there by saying that they may have received threes, fours, or fives. But yes, I think that is what we're saying. I mean, Toby could talk about this more too, but I think based on what I've been reading from what students are saying this year, requiring the test would be it would be an added stress for students who are already stressed out. I think in many cases as well, students who are enrolled in AP courses are enrolled in multiple AP courses, and the tests are all happening right around the same time. So I think some students are also prioritizing which one they're going to study for, and requiring them to take all of them would be very stressful and difficult for students.
Yeah, I mean, I think you asked the question in a helpful way, because if our goal is to make sure that we're getting the highest possible AP exam scores at the end of any given year, we would have very different policies. But our policies being student-centered don't necessarily promote that, and we're proud of that, because that's not the goal. It raises Cove's question, was how do we continue to assess the level of rigor and preparedness of all our students, which is a good one. But the basic idea, we know that increasing access is going to increase the opportunities for success in post-secondary education of any student. So it's important that we increase access, even if that creates a little bit more challenge for some students to get the highest scores on the test. We also know that if there's students who stand nothing to gain from taking the test and at the end of their senior year, are stressed out, have a lot of other commitments and other priorities at that point, have gotten the benefit of learning the content and preparing themselves for college, we don't want to put them through that just to keep our test scores high, right, for feathers in the district's cap or otherwise. So I think those are really smart and intentional. And how do we continue to benchmark our progress and our success? Given that, I think that's the question that's raised here. But we feel really strongly about both of those policies. I think also it's helpful, sort of anecdotal note is in terms of those, you saw the list of colleges and the pattern of some very high achieving students not taking the AP exam. The pattern of receiving credit or receiving advanced placement at institutions of higher ed, the more competitive private schools I think are the least likely to award credit placement to save money or advance your standing. You're going to go and take 4 courses each semester of your freshman year, no matter how many AP courses you have at some of those schools. It's more, I think, our state colleges where you're paying per credit, where those, if they are giving you credit for APs, it may be helpful. So that's kind of also, I think, helping to skew the pattern of the seniors that choose to take or not take the APs based on where they've been accepted. Henry and Tammy, you could probably speak to that better than I, but I know that that's something that we talked about over the course of this process. Anything you want to add to that?
I just thought that was a fascinating new bit of information that we got from our students, was that they know that, why would I take one less course at NYU if I know that I'm still going to have to pay the full amount per semester, right? And so I think that to me, that was just sort of a way of thinking about things that I hadn't thought about before in terms of why students are opting out of the test. I also think that part of the exhaustion that our students are sharing is a real part of how some of our strongest students, their mental health is manifesting. And I think that from this pandemic, right? And we're seeing it from all of our students, mental health manifesting in different ways. And I think that our seniors feeling burnt at this time is just different than it was pre-pandemic. And hopefully we can encourage them to take the test again, because I think it is, in a lot of ways can be a good barometer for how they, for how they prepare themselves and take a really hard test. We want students to take hard tests so that they are prepared for college. I don't necessarily know it's a standard bearer for how our students did in a course or how the school is doing and teaching the course, but it is an opportunity for students to be assessed. And one other bit of information that Katie had shared was that, or we had done in surveying the students, is that of our students who just had the opportunity of taking the AP, think it was like 85% of them said that the course prepared them well. So it wasn't the fear of the course that was the reason why they didn't take the AP.
And if I may add, Rajiv, just to your point in terms of us increasing access, I think we've been working really, really hard to do that, but please know that that does not mean that all of a sudden, you know, our access is like fantastic. We still have AP subjects that are not really broadly represented by our entire student body. What we do know about access is that, you know, just getting into an AP course, even if you're scoring a 1 or a 2, just increases your success for graduation and like beyond and how you do in college. We have also worked for that access. We've aligned our levels, right? And the AP test used to be this like gatekeeper. We had prerequisites that were gatekeepers for students not being able to access the course. So while we've worked on all of that, we still have work to do to ensure that more of our students are accessing these tests. Right now, predominantly, we still have white and Asian students accessing the test, and our Black and Brown students are, while accessing at a higher rate, we're still not where we want to be, and we're going to continue to work towards that. And then, Rajiv, like you said, how do we continue to support our students to ensure that they're being successful in these courses? Those are the things that our teachers are trying to figure out every single day, and that's the hard work that we're putting into our courses every day.
Thanks, Rajiv. And Max, I'm going to interject and make no judgments from the fact that I'm interjecting here to remind everyone that we have 2 more topics, and be mindful of time, please. Max and then Emily.
Yeah, I do have a lot to say about this. I'll try to keep it as organized as I can and as quick. Just have a few comments, some things that I wanted to bring forward. Just trends that I've seen. Personally, of the AP courses I've had and of the courses that my friends have taken, I think the AP teachers have done an absolutely wonderful job teaching the courses. They really do put in the extra effort, and though kind of there is this massive amount of curriculum that has to be covered in a very short amount of time, they always are providing extra sources where we can, outside of class time, on our own time, if we need it, take the time to really get as much of this curriculum as possible. I think we were talking about assessment as well for those who don't take the tests. And I honestly think that most of the people who don't take the test actually are taking the test many times, because the tests that are offered in the class, the quarter tests, the mid-year tests, are all taken from exams. In all my classes, that's how it's been, is that they've taken it from past AP exams. So those A's, those B's that you're seeing are actually really reflected by a ability to pass the actual AP exam. So in the courses, it's absolutely a wonderful job. And I don't think I have any comments, any concerns at all, because my AP teachers have done an absolutely wonderful job. I've also had the experience as a junior and sophomore years in Newton South, and I think across the school district, there is far fewer AP courses offered to the juniors and sophomores. And I think that this, you know, with recently colleges have become more and more exclusive, and I've seen this kind of reflected in many different areas of the school, with people really trying in sophomores and junior years, starting earlier and earlier, really trying to demonstrate as much as they can proficiency in various subjects. So that's something that I've heard as kind of a complaint and a wish, that more AP courses were offered in sophomore, junior year. I know many people that I know I talked to somebody the other day that took just as many AP courses as they could, not really caring about the subjects, but really just trying to take as many, because there's only, I think, 3 or 4 offered to juniors. But also with this, I think this is one of the reasons that you see so many people taking the individually studying for the tests, because it's not offered as a course. And I also had the experience this year of studying individually for the test. And the one thing that I really wish is that I'd known ahead of time, or I had a little bit of more access to the resources at the school that the school has. I know because we have so many people self-studying for these tests, I think probably even more in 2023. I suspect that once those numbers come out, you're going to see even more people taking the self-studying. And I think it's really important that we support the students self-studying for these tests. Some examples, I took calculus this year, and I know that my stats teacher and a lot of the math teachers the way that they teach the curriculum, they take pictures of the board after they write they take notes on the board and they take pictures of it. And I talked to my stats teacher and I talked to a few math teachers about making these pictures of the board of the notes that the classes were taking more accessible to students that are self-studying the course, so that they also could access that information, those resources that the teachers had compiled all in a very neat, very organized fashion. I think it would be pretty simple to, well, I think it would be really helpful to compile some of those wonderful resources that the teachers are compiling for their classes, and also make it available to the people who are independently studying. And I think you'll see way higher test scores and more student satisfaction. So that's what I had to say about that.
That wasn't brief, but
Sorry.
it was really good. It was a lot of good, wonderful information. If anyone would like to respond, I'll pause here.
That was great.
Terrific feedback, Max. Thank you. Emily, you're up, and then Kathy, and then Chris.
I promise I'll be brief. First, I would like to say that I greatly appreciate the drive, the philosophy of increasing access to these tests, I think, and these courses. I think that's very important, and I'm glad that we're going to be increasing that going forward. So I have a question, and then I have a big thank you. So my question is, you talked about how the schedule is affecting timing and the sort of the density of the classes and the size of the blocks. And so my question is, what's roughly the timing? Are you thinking about like any changes? I mean, I know that it's so rigid, the curriculum and how things should be taught. I'm just wondering, because on the next steps was listed something about the scheduling, and I'm just wondering if that's for next year or if that's going to be a process through next year for the year after.
You want me to answer that?
Yes, please.
Okay, so it's a shift. It's a shift is really what it is. And so the change to the new schedule, it just requires work and I think some trial and error in terms of how to adjust the instructional activities that we had before the new schedule and before the pandemic at that point as well, to the new chunks of time, the new frequency of classes, and the new number of times you can assign homework, if you will, when there's 3 classes meeting a week as opposed to 4. The good thing is it's not just a neutral shift. The schedule is designed to create opportunities for support and access for students to lots of academic opportunities and enrichment and extra support. So when we talk about WinBlock being a place where teachers are able to individualize and provide extra support to students, that's why we have WinBlock 3 times a week in addition to Tiger and Lion Block. So it's really important that that's the opportunity. And it's not just about taking the activities that we did before and parsing them out over the same number of minutes in 3 different times. There's really opportunities here to rethink some of the learning activities, to make them more engaging, to make them more hands-on, to allow the depth of conceptual understanding to happen. It's hard to do in an AP course where you have so much content that you have to get through. So there is that drive to stuff more into every period. But overall, the design of the schedule is designed with the longer blocks is designed to promote those more hands-on applied learning opportunities, which will help in AP just as much as in any course, but that's a shift. So some, teachers in each subject trying new materials, trying new activities, adapting activities that they used to do in a 55-minute class before to, combine with another activity in a 75-minute class, or stretch it out to go get, cover a couple different concepts or topics. So there's no specific time frame, but it's getting data back like this and seeing which kids are doing well, who's doing well compared to your class assessments versus the AP exam, and making those adjustments that they're able to do that in an ongoing way. And, one of the constraints to that is the decreases to our budget around professional development, particularly in the time for summer workshop time for teachers, as well as access to outside professional development like that provided by the College Board to AP teachers. It's really devastating. And so not having the time and resources to dedicate to that, as we've seen that shift and that decrease in PD funding, both in last year's current budget and next year's budget, it's going to make it harder to do that. And we're relying on our teachers to do that independently in some cases. The great thing about the size of our high schools, all of our AP classes, there's a team of teachers teaching the course. So you're not a solo operator in any AP course. So getting those teachers together to be able to collaborate on that work is crucial, together with their department head. And so we look for those opportunities to do that wherever possible. So that was a lot of answer to that. Henry, Tammy, did I leave anything out from that answer you want to highlight?
I just, Toby, if I may, when you talked about resources a little bit, and this kind of goes into what Max was talking about earlier in terms of the number of AP courses that we offer at the sophomore and junior level. I think we also have to be just really cognizant of the amount of stress that students put on themselves. And that's something that we are always cognizant of. But if you look at the number of courses that are being offered, there's definitely a resource allocation issue with that as well, right? With the resources that now I've been at Newton for 2 years, and 2 years I've had to cut FTE. It affects our AP classes. It affects what classes we can run. It affects the class sizes that we have in our AP courses. And I think all of those are also a factor that go into that, right? When you talk about students self-studying, a lot of our teachers, out of the goodness of their hearts, despite having a full teaching course load, are helping students who self-study, which is not always sustainable. So Max, while I appreciate that, writing on the board and then taking a picture and sharing with students is not difficult to do, remember that those kids are then also going to those teachers for the resources, and they already have 100 kids that they need to help, right? So I think those are just factors that play into that. So I don't know if I believe that self-studying is the way to go, and that's just me being honest. But also we cannot ignore the fact that our resources have been cut into, if you will, and that is 100% affecting class sizes and the courses that we run and what years we can run them in and what we can offer our students.
And I would just say, in terms of the schedule question, it is a matter of choices, Emily. For example, I would always tell my US history class that we're a month behind because everyone takes the AP at the same time, but most of the country starts in mid-August, right? And so they have just a lot more time to cover. And yet, as I think you know, is that Massachusetts has the highest AP scores, and so we're all jamming that into our shorter window for the assessment. So what do some schools do is that, as I said before, is that they may have 2 years of US history, or honors bio, it becomes the prerequisite for AP bio. So you can kind of build it as a 2-year course so that students have more time to learn. And so certainly our schedule is, teachers are adjusting to it. It's not just a matter of changing the schedule to in a different way so that more students, so there's more time. It may be actually, if that's what we were focused on, how do we make sure that students have more access to the content earlier? So, for example, at Newton South, there were years ago where the world history teachers in 10th grade taught early American history in the spring for students who are taking the AP. Like, those are things that were done in the past. I'm not sure they're best practice, but they are a matter of choice. And I just wanted to say one thing that Rajiv mentioned, and I want to just clarify, is that I think we need to push against the idea that access means and I don't necessarily know this is what you're saying, but I just want to say it publicly, that access means that was more Black and brown students are taking the AP. And while that may be true, and Tammy is right about the disparity, the reality is we do have programs like the Calculus Project do support students. And there are a lot of reasons why more students are taking the AP. So it's not just an access reason for why we may have seen a decline in some of our AP tests.
Thank you, Emily, for your question. Two quick last questions. Apologize, guys. We really do have to get moving. Kathy and then Chris.
Let me just say my quick thing. I'm so sorry I didn't get a chance to say it. And frankly, it was more important than the question from my perspective. It'll take 2 seconds.
Very brief. Go ahead.
I want to say a huge thank you to Katie Hogue for the amount of time and effort that was put into this incredibly detailed report, not just the presentation, but the detail behind it. I have to imagine that it must have taken 40 or 50 hours of your time just to put that together. And I would like to say how greatly appreciative I am of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, Kathy.
So I think my question's super quick. Katie, on the survey that you're doing now for 12th grade AP course enrollments, I think you said there were 1,022 students taking, or there are 1,022 enrollments. What percentage of those enrollments do you have as responses? That's what I was confused about.
Sorry.
What your response rate is?
So that's actually the number of responses we have so far.
I see.
So,
City enrollments.
that's a great question that I don't have an answer to right now. I would have to go back and pull that.
2,400
Is that about the survey?
Yeah. Do
So
you,
we asked, so kids could take the survey multiple times based on the test that they took. So they took
Yep.
the survey in class. So if they took calculus, they took the survey, and then if they took AP bio, they took the survey, but for that test. So the numbers are based on test takers, not on individual students.
enrollments, right? Course enrollments.
Yeah.
But that was specific, what was presented in the slides was specific for 12th graders. We did ask anyone enrolled in an AP course to respond to this. So we could get back to you on the actual number of enrollments. So you could calculate a response rate, but we're still collecting information from students right now as well.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Kathy. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you, everyone. Tammy, you touched on my my first quick question of the change in class sizes as we've seen enrollment expand. What's the magnitude of that? Do we have numbers of average class sizes in AP?
Yeah, I mean, our AP classes have been maxed out since long before this started. So this is not about adding more students to AP classes. The classes are running at similar sizes. They are very large. It varies by content area. And there's variation from year to year, just depending on how many students enroll and the sort of the breaks and whether it makes 2 sections, 3, 7, or 8. So it's not about that. What we have is a limited number of seats total. So as we have more and more students interested, it's much harder to place younger, students in 10th or 11th grade that want access into AP courses when they're filled with seniors. It's much harder to get students additional AP courses in the same year. So that's typically some of our highest achieving students where they're going to get closed out of whether it's their 3rd, 4th, or 5th AP on that year, because they've already got some opportunities and others haven't. So that's where we're seeing the other area we're seeing, I think, is particularly in some of our lower grade classes that feed to AP courses that are the prerequisite classes. So as our budget at the high school for staffing has not kept up with the size of the enrollment increases, essentially our staffing budget's been cut over multiple budget cycles. The size of the feeder classes for our AP courses are getting bigger. And so that's really a challenge that we're dealing with as well too. A good reason for the shift in schedule, among other things, to make sure we have supports and opportunities to individualize and follow up with students in any class, but something that we're also grappling with based on the resources available.
Okay. And then I was in looking at the access, one of the questions I had was on the prerequisites and how we're dropping the barriers and is that something that's contributing to the what we're seeing in the test scores. So I took a look at the Ed Trust report that you had cited relative to that, and so they have that state by state data thing. So the takeaway I had from that report was a little bit more about building up students and making sure they have the knowledge coming in, as opposed to saying removing the prerequisite itself. And if you look at Massachusetts, the metrics they use were representation in 8th grade Algebra 1 and then representation AP courses. For Black students in Massachusetts, they were 107% represented in Algebra 1 and 66% represented in AP courses. And for Latino students, it was 74%, dropping to 55%. I guess, philosophically, how are we thinking about that, looking at that? How is the decision made of which prerequisites we're dropping? We talk about the calculus project all the time as one of those things to put kids on that path to, build up that base of knowledge to make them be successful in taking calculus. But how do I relate kind of what I read here to how we're, running things on the ground in Newton?
You want to talk about the different meaning of prerequisites? Is that helpful for this conversation too that we
Well,
talked about?
sure. I mean, I think one piece in terms of the types of prerequisites that were removed were things like participation in a summer course to get, to be prepared for the particular AP course that was determined that actually wasn't needed for success in the course. I know it's a little different from the report that you were reading there, but that's one example. Or another example would be that some of our courses had an exam that students had to take before they enrolled in the AP course, and it was determined that actually was not needed to access the content.
Yeah.
So that's sort of, that's what we meant when we were talking about the unnecessary prerequisites, things that were determined that actually were not necessary to be successful in the course. And I think Toby or Tammy and Henry can probably elaborate on this as well, but there are still some prerequisites that do remain. I mean, Henry mentioned for biology, right? Like for AP Bio, there's some course prerequisites that students have to have taken prior in order to be ready to access that content. So I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's spot on. Like the data from the EdTrust survey or report that you're talking about, I think is instructive of how are we making sure that all of those students who are on the right path to take these AP courses are in fact enrolling. So eliminating some of those unnecessary barriers is one of the strategies that we're using to do that. And that's research based. What we're finding is that the students who are enrolling in the AP courses are ready to access the content. They're participating in the courses fully. So, you know, that part is showing us these are unnecessary barriers to the course if that was something preventing them from enrolling, because they're getting the benefit of the course, they're participating and learning and accessing that rigorous course. It's been shown to correlate to additional success in post-secondary ed. But I'll pass it over to Henry and then Tammy if you want to elaborate on that or get to other parts of Chris's question. I'm not sure we've touched on all of it.
Yeah, I guess the one thing I'm really interested in is like, I mean, we don't have probably, you know, the exact comparable data of, you know, Algebra 1 versus, but would we, you know, see a similar pattern where, you know, you have this much better representation at, say, the middle school level that really kind of starts to fall off at the high school level
I see.
when it comes to
So I mean, we look at that really.
One clarifying thing, aren't most eighth graders taking Algebra 1 in Massachusetts, which is different than other states? Could you clarify that, Toby? Because
we rank highest in the country.
Because our math curriculum in eighth grade includes Algebra 1.
Like the EdTrust report is written as a national report to address like national patterns that are simply not present here in Newton or in Massachusetts. But we track this very carefully in terms of our students in the calculus project. And ensuring that those students who are in that pipeline and ready to move on based on everything from MCAS scores to grades to course enrollments are starting and then continuing on those paths. So that's some of what we're addressing through these measures to ensure there's not unnecessary barriers to enrollment. Henry, you want to talk about it from there, and then Tammy?
I think it's really hard to measure how someone is doing in eighth grade to how they're going to do in their junior or senior year. There's just so much growth, and just from eighth grade to ninth grade. So that's sort of like why, you know, Newton did a lot of reduction of sort of the gatekeeping of courses in between levels over the course for, you know, 15, 20 years ago. I think that, I think that is, I just forgot what my second point was going to be, so I'll pass.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, like Henry said, that was 15, 20 years ago. Like over the past, I would say 7 or 8 years, like our prerequisites have not really changed in terms of the course. And just something to reiterate that Henry said, because students are accessing the course, it doesn't mean that the scores of the course are going down. It means that more kids are taking the test, and the kids who would traditionally get a 3, 4, and 5 are still getting a 3, 4, and 5 and or not choosing to take that exam. So just to be cognizant of that, access does not equal lower test scores. Just Henry, I think that's what you and I were trying to say earlier.
Yeah, the last thing I was just going to say was just that some of the other prerequisites were a grade in a course, that you had to have an A in an honors course, and that was just not we had at that, it was maybe like 6 or 7 years ago that we just saw that we were doing a lot of overrides for students who wanted to take the test or wanted to take the class rather, and they were doing well despite having a B in a previous course. And so I think that, you know, I think the thing that I'm also thinking in terms of this is over the last couple of years is that we have a lot of students who are looking to take these classes, right? So it's not necessarily that we're pushing kids to take more AP classes. In fact, a lot of our language is to reduce the number of AP classes that students are taking. You know, we send a letter out and if they take more than 3 AP classes, that this is going to be a lot of work and to recognize the amount of stress that you're taking. And so we're just seeing a lot of drive by students. That's why I push against like the access question, because it's many students from a variety of different demographics who are looking to take more AP classes. So it's not necessarily a reduction of our criterion, even though there's been some changes. I think it's a drive of more students wanting to take these classes.
Thanks, Chris, for your question. Paul, if you'd like to go very quickly, very briefly, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, Katie and Toby and everybody. What I don't understand, I'm taking as what you say to be true about college credits and stress and all the other things. And what would appear to me then is that the children who are choosing to take the exams are the ones who would appear to value highly the likelihood of doing well in the exams rather than doing poorly in the exams. And yet the numbers who are doing poorly relative to the ones who are doing well have increased. So we have a self-selected group of students who want to take the exams because they think they can get college credit or for whatever reason. And of that group, more are doing poorly. That's part one. And two, if you look at the Newton numbers relative to some of our peer communities, that pattern isn't as strong. And they're subject to the same forces as everybody else. So what am I missing in the analysis that suggests why kids who think they would do well in the exams aren't?
Sure. So the first piece I would say is that looking at our comparison districts, they have different policies. So I've described some of those in the report. It makes it difficult to do that comparison.
Why?
Because those districts require that the students take the exam, all students, anyone who's enrolled in the AP course, or they have a much stricter prerequisites than we do. So the students who are taking those tests, those courses and those tests it's a different population than the students in our district who are taking the tests. It makes comparison difficult.
But we've just heard that expanding the access and getting rid of unnecessary prerequisites doesn't affect performance in the classes. So while those communities might have those requirements, they would be meaningless per our logic.
Would you like to respond to that?
Think about it this way. If you wanted to make sure you had all 4s and 5s on the AP, right, you would put up a bunch of barriers and say, I only want kids with A+ in the prerequisite class, right, and who've done extra work in the summer, come to these extra summer programs, and then you could ensure that you're hitting the highest possible like hit rate, right? For a student's in the course, goes through the course, they're willing to work through each vacation and preparing for it, and then they're going to get 4s and 5s without a doubt, right? We're looking at kids who say, I want to be in that course because I want to learn the material. It's exciting to me. I'm going to work hard at it. I'm, depending on what college I get into, I may or may not want to take the exam at the end of the year because it may or may not be of value to me to get the score of the exam at the end of the year. So our policies are much more student focused based on what are your interests, where do you want to go, where do you see yourself? And I think a big portion of those students canceling at the last minute too, like I said, it is based on their ultimate college acceptance, which they've gotten by that point in time. And then they're able to opt out of the exam at the end because, hey, I got a lot out of this course. I don't need it. It's not going to benefit me at the school that I've gotten into, while others, particularly tuition is charged differently, or they can actually get out of it, we'll stick with it regardless of the outcome. So does that answer your question, Paul?
No, it doesn't answer the basic question of why would kids who don't think they're going to do well take the exams. It seems to me it's a self-selected group of the ones who think they're going to do well, and yet the percentage who have done well has dropped.
No, it's not. They're not choosing based on my odds of getting a high score. They're choosing based on, if I get a high score, will it benefit me in my college career? They've already gotten the benefit of taking a rigorous AP course to prepare them for the rigors of college courses. So then what's the added benefit of taking the AP exam at the end of the year? it's even if it's a long shot, right? If you're going to a state college where they charge tuition for freshman year by credit and you can get to take less credits freshman year and complete freshman year, you give it a shot. If you're going to a Ivy League school or anywhere else where they're like, you're paying us $80,000 no matter how many courses you take, and you have to take full enrollment no matter what. If you're placed out, you go to the next course. Like, why am I going to sit through the exam for a day or two in a beautiful day in May when I've already learned all the biology I can this year and I'm ready to go into the next course?
So thank you very much. Paul, I'm going to ask you to suspend at
I'm
this
done.
point. I don't think it can be said that we are truncating this conversation, which has been well over an hour. It's been thorough. It's been very full and rich. I appreciate all of the work that you put into it, Katie, as I think has been said. For me, the only member who hasn't shared their thoughts or questions, I'll just say, for me, it seems very clear what you've all articulated. Tammy and Henry, I bring you into this part of the conversation, that there's value in taking the class that is certain to our students. There's the value of having a rigorous, thoughtful, fun, enriching exchange with your peers and learning with your peers. That's that joy of learning that we're all so like we want to see that, right? That's a wonderful thing that we should be pursuing and making sure our students are pursuing equally. But there's an uncertain value in taking the test. And that's because the whole host of reasons that you put in your memo, schools are not accepting those results in the same way or at all as they used to. Students are choosing that the fun of taking the class, of having that rigorous, enriching environment with their peers is worth more to them than having a 4 or a 5 or a 3 or whatever it is as the ultimate score. So I think we have to be very cognizant of making sure that we see that these are two somewhat related, though not equal, value judgments. And so for me, as a person who, I was one of those kids who had 5 AP courses, I chose to take AP and sit for the test in 3 of them. The other 2 were just for fun. It was an amazing, challenging, they were AP Bio, which I did not like, but I did the dang thing and I was able to do pipetting and gel electrophoresis and terms I don't even want to remember, but I have it because I took those classes and it was wonderful. So I think, again, be very careful in making sure that we're evaluating in a very reasonable way the opportunities that are in front of our students. And Max, you have the words of the night. I thought your comments were fantastic. And if we could find a way to open up the those notes and work with the teachers so that our self-directed students can take a peek at what they're doing with the rest of their courses, I think that would be wonderful. But anywho, thank you very much, Toby. Thank you, Katie. Wonderful, thankful work on your part. I appreciate it. Thank you, Henry, and thank you, Tammy. Okay, we are going to shift gears to a goals update on diversity, equity, and inclusion. For this, we have Kathy Lopes, Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and we are welcoming for our very first time, Naomi Joseph, our new DEI Assistant Director, who joined us in January. Welcome, Naomi, and welcome, Kathy.
Hello, good evening. 3 years in the district. This is my first in-person school committee.
If I'd known that, I would have said that too.
So it is almost 9 o'clock. We will try to share with you the work that the department has been prioritizing this school year. Up ahead is our collective year in review. This is the 3rd year in review that has been created from this department. So some of it is really about building some of the structures, programmatic structures that started 2 years ago. And in some instances, we're going to highlight some new programs and some new initiatives that have happened. So we're going to walk through. Also, this will be distributed to the broader community. We may take some feedback from this meeting and make adjustments before it goes out to everyone, but this is something that we hope goes out to everyone. There is a table of contents because it is a large document. Hopefully you've had time to kind of comb through it. We're going to give some high level updates. Some things will go in specific, but and then we have some questions to the end. Katie Hoag has been so wonderful and agreed to stay with us tonight just in case there are some additional data questions at the end, but let's also be mindful mindful. She's been here for a very long time. Okay, so if you go, we really start with, we always want to acknowledge our partners in this work. Everything about this department is really about bringing in the collective and identifying leaders in different departments. So here's just a list of the communities or the groups that we've partnered with this year for a various number of reasons. We just wanted to highlight. We've also recently been reached out. The Newton Upstanders is a community group that has come up, and I'm sure you'll see them in next year's report. But just wanted to give a shout out and highlight our partners in this work in a variety of reasons. Also, as we walk through this report, you will see in most of our priorities, it is connected. We tried to align it with some of our system-wide goals that were created in the beginning of the school year. So you'll see that just our partnership is really aligned with our educational equity goal, wanting to make sure that we are developing ongoing initiatives focused on more learning environments and communication and such. The next slide is just our department update. So we do have Naomi Joseph, who came on in January, and I'm so grateful to have her partnership. She's been an amazing addition. Maura was an incredible loss, as many of you know, but Naomi has stepped right in, and it's been a wonderful partnership. We also have our administrative assistant, Angela Sasso, who's been helping with some of our communications in different pieces of the department. So just wanted to highlight not only our department status, but in this, some of the communications we provide through the department. So we have our website, we have our newsletters that go out about bi-monthly. We also created an Instagram page too. Angela had helped us with that to really just be able to put out more information to different groups of folks out in the community. Our first district priority is an update on our non-discrimination protocol. Again, you'll see the two system-wide goals that we've connected it to. But last year in March 2022, we rolled out the non-discrimination protocol and updated our policy. Many of you were involved in that. And there was a question about the data of the report. So I can give you kind of a superficial view of some of the updates that we've been able to collect. We do have to take into consideration, one, the school year is not done. Two, there's still some kinks we're working out. We do have some school communities that are practicing this tool more than others. We are aware of who they are and who needs additional support. But I just wanted to capture some information that I thought would be really helpful. We were able to collect 99 initial complaints that began this school year. And one that doesn't capture the breadth of the issues that are happening. But out of these 99, we were able to look at the type of discrimination that was coded when the report was submitted. So you'll see here a large percentage were along, and all the protected classes are listed, but the largest percentage was discrimination against race or national origin. Our reports come in from students. They come in from adults in the building where students have shared with them. They come from our staff. We have some staff that fill out these discrimination reports. And we have our online report that can be from any community member, anyone who is in our community, whether that's a parent, someone who's here for a basketball game and such. So out of these 99 reports, you'll see that the largest number of discrimination reports were connected to race, discrimination against race or national origin. Second by sex, which then gets referred to Title I. So a lot of that would be sexual harassment cases or issues where people are reporting being uncomfortable or feeling like sexual assault or harassment. And then the next would be around gender discrimination. This really captures some of the issues around transphobia, homophobia, and that we're seeing across the board. And then you'll see the other protected classes represented as well. We looked at grade level to kind of get a sense of what age are these coming in. And as of right now, it's pretty even amongst the three levels, hovering around the 30% for each. And again, I think after another year, we'll be able to comb through this a little bit more, but it is to say that things are happening in elementary school. It's not solely in high school. It shifts a little bit in high school where it becomes like a social media thing, TikTok, but in elementary, we are getting reports of students just saying things, and we use the opportunity not for punitive measures, but to really utilize some educational strategies, some restorative strategies. We have counselors, we have teachers give lessons, we have students we pull in parents, and we have students really think about and understand why what they were projecting was harmful, because often when they're young, they're just kind of repeating something they heard. They're not really understanding the harm, but I can guarantee you that the student who is receiving it is aware that what was said and what was done was harmful. So we really always want to center the target of these these issues. And lastly, just a capture of where these incidents are happening mostly. So mostly the blue is school grounds. These are happening in classrooms, on school grounds, at recess, lunch. A small percentage is happening online. I believe we have 5%. And then a smaller percentage is what I coded as school community. So it might be over in Newtonville. It might be at another school for an athletic event, but still affiliated with school. But you'll see the largest percentage of those reported are actually happening on our school grounds. And then our next priority is the hiring and retention. And again, this is a continuance of our first year priority and will hopefully always be a part of the work of this department. So wanted to highlight just a couple of things. The superintendent search that went on, the DEI department was represented by me in that search, but also with my colleagues who are constantly in conversations about hiring practices and such. We were able to launch the LaSalle partnership, which offers a lot of financial support in addition to different supports for our Unit C staff of color. Our first cohort was launched in January. That is a picture of our first cohort. 10 of the 14 are NPS staff members, and they are launching a new cohort in September and have already received 50 applications. And this particular cohort already has 3 classes under their belt. In addition to the financial support, some of the classes are hybrid that really match some of their schedules, and where the in-person classes are offered on MPS campus, which makes it easier for them to access, and they get to do this in community. So wonderful feedback from the professors and the students of the program. And again, our DESE teacher diversification professional learning community is something that Martina Alabama from the HR department was able to apply to and receive some grant funding. It breaks down some of the financial assistance that DESE is offering. To be available to receive the grants, you have to send a district team to participate in a professional learning community monthly. So there are 4 of us representing Newton, myself, Susie Talukdar, who I'm sure all of you know is a principal at Underwood, Renee, our assistant superintendent teaching and learning, and Martine. The 4 of us participate in this monthly learning community for the 2nd year. And just kind of a little shout out, we were reached out, and there's hundreds and hundreds of folks on this call, lots of districts across the state represented. And they did reach out to Newton to be one of the districts that presents on our hiring and retention strategies. So we were called out just for some of the work that they are aware of that we're doing here to talk to all the other districts across the state. So we are currently working on that presentation for, I believe, next week. And thinking about retention, and this has been heavily supported by NSF with some of the grant funding, so we can hold spaces to support affinity spaces for not only our BIPOC staff and faculty members, but also for administrators. We've been able to carve out 2 different groups. So you'll see here, we do events throughout the year, we gather. It is a wonderful opportunity for staff who sometimes feel completely isolated in their school community, sometimes one of 3 in a school community, and we come together, and there's always a surprise that there are this many folks of color in the district. And it's utilized not only for community, which I think is an important piece of this in terms of sustaining or retaining folks of color in predominantly white spaces, but it's also used for, I don't know what's dinging, but it's also used for, I just lost my train of thought. An opportunity to kind of share what are your needs, what are your experiences, so we can continue to support staff, create mentorship opportunities, leadership opportunities. And we've also now been able to kind of create some spaces for administrators of color. And Newton we've actually, we'll have some demographics that just highlight some of the ways that our administration has become a bit more diverse since I first began here. But again, also a place for us to come together because some of our experiences are slightly different than being an educator or a staff member in a building. But this is something that gets well attended. People are really excited about it. It's always a good time. We were able to just show some pictures of the joy that is experienced in these spaces. And this is also where we're able to communicate some of the work about the LaSalle partnership or help folks understand there's a non-discrimination process, which also supports staff of color feeling like there's somewhere to go when they are experiencing just discrimination or harm. There's an accountability piece that didn't exist prior to this. So that is something that folks who have utilized the tool have felt like, I'm just glad this is here and I'm glad that this is being taken seriously. Just to highlight staff demographics, this was a report that was shared with me from HR, and it's just a comparison. I believe the first chart was shared last year in the HR presentation. I asked for just a similar update just so we can see where there's growth. Now, understanding some of the budget issues and some of the hiring or what we kind of the cuts we've had to make, there's not a significant substantial shift. But if you look at the bottom, and I know it's really hard to see up here, so hopefully you have your report accessible. I just circled some places where there have been increases and some places small increases. But when we think about staff of color, we have seen a slight increase, not only in central staff, but across the board. And what I do highlight is although the increases may seem small, it does show that we're not losing staff, right? That at least the retention is standing, and then hopefully we can continue to grow and create a community that feels more in line with their student representation. So I just wanted to highlight that. There's also in this year's report, there is a Hispanic or Latino box that wasn't representative in the first one. So although it shows there may be a decline in those who identify as white, I'm left to wonder if including that box actually kind of shifted, giving those a different option to choose their ethnic or cultural identity. All right.
So in alignment with the hiring and retention, we have our district priority of staff development. And this is aligned with our system-wide goals of academic excellence and educational equity. So providing learning experiences for educators, continuing to provide access to their students' rich curriculum, and where they're able to apply their deeper understandings. So one of our first staff development pieces I'd like to highlight is the Mass Ready program that our central admin staff was able to participate in. It was 6 days of training, and they were able to work with other districts across Massachusetts. And it was really grounded in this modeling of anti-racist and inclusive practices that Massachusetts has been focusing on. And so our central admin team has been able to participate in some training related to this work and bring it back to Newton as well. Our department's also been able to continue to hold summer training, and this will be our 3rd year of hosting summer training. And there are teams of leaders and administrators at the elementary and middle school levels that have been participating in the summer training. We use a train the trainer model. So this is really where we're building capacity throughout the summer, and then they're bringing the work back to their buildings to share out and build capacity there as well. And there are some pictures at the bottom of training from last year. As we continue to support the work that's going on throughout the year, our department's able to work with the leaders as they are running professional development for their teams throughout the school year. So by providing some programming, continuing to design it with them, facilitation and reflection on the professional development related to culturally responsive instruction, our teams able to work with them in different schools as needed. We're also able to plan out some programming for families and students related to culturally responsive instruction and support that at a school level as well. We also have an elementary PLC that's been running. Assistant superintendents of teaching and learning, of student services and elementary education have been leading this PLC alongside special education teachers and curriculum coordinators. And they've been really working on this implementation and evaluation portion of culture responsive practices. So we have a PLC at the elementary level that's been supporting the staff development work. And then thinking about how this is considered for all of our students. So that PLC has been running. And newly, we are starting our culture responsive pre-summer planning team. This team was kind of created out of a need for more consistency across the elementary schools and across the district, and to really make sure that we are coming together. So this team will be working and supporting our summer programming for this upcoming summer, but also supporting creating a scope and sequence for professional development throughout the school year as well. And so we'll be meeting with them as we plan out our summer programming for this upcoming year. No, you're okay. We also have internal structures and supports, and this is really related to educational equity. Again, thinking about empowering our leadership as they develop, our equitable district initiatives and practices. And so we continue to have our DEI advisory this year. And this year, our focus for our advisory was gender affirming practices and guidances. We have an incredible team of staff members, educators, administrators at all different levels. And they've been really working on providing some guidances that we're hoping to introduce and put forth in the upcoming years and upcoming months and year. And this, we've also been working on a field trip guidance and considering student accessibility as well. And so that's been the most recent focus of our group and thinking about student accessibility and considerations when planning field trips. Internally, our department has also just been able to provide consultation and supports. This has really been, as I kind of mentioned before, professional development workshops, continuing to provide educational resources, also providing restorative supports, and collaborating on ongoing needs on an ongoing basis as needs arise for different administrators and supporting schools. At an academic level, we have a couple different internal structures. I know you've been able to hear from LEP, but we've been also able to meet with them several times throughout the year and consult with the different leaders. And this graphic is one that should be familiar to this committee as they've been able to see it. But this again shows kind of the work of LEP, showing that students who were below grade level, who identified as students of color, but were enrolled in LEP, they grew at a more accelerated rate in comparison to the students of color who were below grade level and not enrolled in LEP. And so again, just wanted to highlight this academic program.
In addition to the academic programs, two that you're certainly familiar with, Legacy Scholars and Calculus projects. So when we highlight these are things that are being led at the building level that we just support, whether through PD or consultation or helping them think about this. So we just want to include this in our department, but these are led throughout the buildings with building leaders. This graph with the Legacy Scholars just really highlights that students who are participating in the did I write calculus project? But that the increase in students who are participating in Legacy Scholars. And when you look at the green and the purple, so the students who identify as Asian or more than one race tend to be performing at or have access to, is this one about access? There may be a slight error here that I'm just trying to, I think this is access. Completing advanced courses. So when we look, Asian students and those who identify with more than one race, which actually, if you comb through the data, we were able to learn many of those, the largest percentage of those who are identifying as more than one race are those who are identifying as Asian and white, that their access and completing advanced courses remains at a high level, where we still see Hispanic students and African-American students below level, but that you do see the increase with access to Legacy Scholars. What I do want to highlight here, because there's questions that always arise about equity and what does it mean for other students when we are supporting those who have been historically marginalized, is the impact on those who haven't been historically marginalized. Is if you look at the yellow line, that for white students who have already been performing at a high level, this does not impact them in a negative way. They are still performing, they are still accessing, they are still doing well. So I just wanted to highlight, as we consider access and opportunities to those who have been historically marginalized, that this does not have a negative impact on those. Actually, the idea of equity and creating spaces for all impacts all students. So I just wanted to highlight that piece right there. The next is a calculus project, which we have been pretty involved, at least this department has been really involved in supporting with their professional development and working with the teams at both high schools to really think about how to support the educators of the calculus project, particularly during the summer. So we just want to highlight that connection with our department. And again, this just shows that students participating in the calculus project are more likely to be enrolled in courses leading to calculus or in calculus courses than their peers. And you'll see it here also, again, broken down by race. And if you have questions, we can return to this to break that down a little bit more. Our next district priority is curriculum assessment and revisions.
So this is really connected again to academic excellence. And as we continue to share, it's again continuing to support the efforts to make curriculum rich, engaging, and challenging for our students. So this year, our anti-racist curriculum and instruction committee, the focus has been on social justice standards and specifically 4 power standards that the committee was able to highlight and brought to admin council. At admin council, the committee was able to have some considerations. What would this look like for teachers? What does this look like in curriculum? What does it look like for students? And engage in some conversations about how to involve the power standards throughout the schools and throughout the systems. Also, as you see graphic 2, this committee alongside Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, Renee, were able to put forth this big picture idea. This graphic is adopted from Scarborough's reading rope, but we were able to try to use this as a visual to highlight the different initiatives and how they come together. So as we're seeing reflection work and learning, culturally based tools and student behaviors, again, they all intertwine and come under this umbrella of equity, vision, and work. And so we've been able to also show how some of the initiatives that administrators have been toggling with show a kind of visual to say how this all interconnects. Another instructional resource has been the Wellness Committee. And the Wellness Committee, this is something that our office has been able to join and be a part of. They're revising the policies and guidelines. And this year has been the focus on the 5th grade puberty lesson and the YRBS and examining some of the questions. And we were really just there, Kathy specifically as support, just to again, remind and advise around equity and inclusion as we're considering wellness priorities and guidelines for all of our students. We're also really excited that this year we partnered with the elementary SEL department to introduce our social justice library. This is a virtual and tangible library that again combats like racism, bias, and ableism in a developmentally appropriate way through picture books and resources. And these kind of serve as discussion guides for educators to introduce to their students at the elementary level, and also just engaging in conversation and learning, as Kathy mentioned before, we think about their non-discrimination and the reports that are coming in, again, supporting those restorative conversations for elementary students. These have been really helpful, and we received a lot of positive feedback. We also have the critical literacy website. This was introduced by the literacy coordinators, but we also were able to showcase this last year at summer programming for the CRI training that we offered. But this is just another resource related to critical literacy for the elementary and middle school teachers. And again, it's just another stop for information, resources, and lessons. And then cultural resources, which we've been able to our department has been able to partner with teaching and learning, and we've been able to put out resources related to the month-long celebrations. This is in collaboration with the curriculum coordinators, but this just serves as resources for the educators. There are change makers and historical figures that are part of this, class activities, videos, lessons that have been done from other educators as well. We also made sure to include Inclusive Schools Week and kind of celebrate the intersectionality of student needs. So these are resources that come out at the beginning of each month prior to as resources for educators as they're planning out through the months. Another district priority for us has been community engagement and education. And we really have been wanting to continue to engage our families in our priorities and creating spaces for their voices. And I think one that we all can really recognize was the community response to the public hearing that was happened at the end of March. So many people came out and support and just be able to speak. And I think to see the community come together, we had over 800 people between Zoom and in person, and really speak to student success and excellence, but then also speak to how the work of DEI through not just this office, but throughout Newton has really been impactful in securing student success. So that was a community engagement opportunity that we really wanted to highlight. Also last week, we had the community forum. We hosted this last year, but this year it was centered around culture responsive community. And this is just expanding the idea of what culture responsive community means, thinking about different identities and learning needs throughout the district. We had panelists with students, parents, educators, and we also had a guest speaker. And in some of the reflections that were shared, they're highlighted on the screen. I'll just point out some snippets. You know, one educator really appreciated that Newton's a district where we can address the biases when we see them. Another educator really spoke to being appreciative that bring together the educators, students, and parents together as partners in this conversation. And then a Newton parent kind of just said how they were really grateful for this opportunity and acknowledged the work that still needs to be done. So these are just some quotes that you're more than welcome to read on your own as well, but we just wanted to highlight. And then a last kind of community highlight piece was our No Place for Hate rally, really led incredibly by our middle school and high school students with support of their educators. Again, it was amazing to see students standing together, really speaking out in solidarity against acts of hate and discrimination. So many students spoke from a vulnerable place, kind of shared their personal experiences in general, but specifically within the Newton community. And students really had a call for action to kind of make schools a more safe and inclusive space. And so it was really awesome to see students of so many different identities standing together at Newton North and South. And this is another community-wide piece that we really wanted to highlight.
And just to, this was our second year hosting the No Place for Hate, and this really came out last year and initiated at Newton South because of the rise in the anti-Semitic harm and slurs and acts that were happening in the school. So we did partner with the IAC and used this format that the ADL provides about bringing folks together and doing a walk. And so this was our second year. And what it does is we have students from 6th grade through 12th representing all different stories and narratives about their experiences, and just kind of coming together to talk about one, why it's harmful, what the experience is, but to really empower students about being more active in the community. So this is something that was kind of like born out of harm, but continues to grow, and we're really proud of it. So the last district priority for this year are evaluation tools and measurements. So we've tried to be intentional about showing some qualitative and quantitative data throughout the report. And here we just wanted to highlight some additional places. So we wanted to just highlight student experience, and that is actually something we're going to really consider more next year about getting student feedback on this. But we do look at the connectedness survey and the YRBS. But I just wanted to highlight this particular graph, which is likely inaccurate on the one you have unless you printed out this evening. So it has been updated. There was a glitch in the way it was uploaded. So we did have to highlight that it shows particularly the question that all 10th graders across the district were asked to answer about how frequently they've had personally heard, noticed, or experienced discrimination based on various factors within their school communities. And what this graph shows is that 62% of respondents reported hearing, noticing, or experiencing discrimination based on race and ethnicity. This was the most frequently reported types of discrimination, which is in line with the data that we first showed regarding our non-discrimination protocol reports. And then students identifying as Black, African-American, or Hispanic and Latinx were most likely to report hearing, noticing, experiencing discrimination based on race and ethnicity more than once a week than Asian, white, or multi-race students. And if you look further, it just kind of breaks down the frequency of how often it is experienced or overheard in connection and breakdown by race. So just to kind of continue to drive in that this work is necessary, and that there are those who are being impacted, and we're trying to address them as best as we can. The other is discipline data. So this is something that I use frequently when I just kind of talk about the biases we have and historically our educational school systems and how we think about discipline. And there's been a push, a very intentional push to shift to restorative practices and be able to provide opportunities for students and adults to kind of process harm and grow and learn. So the first graph really shows, this was our last full year pre-pandemic. And so what that graph shows is that when we look at the disproportionate rates in which students get disciplined, and discipline, this comes from DESE, is considered any in or out of school suspension. And this is all public information on the DESE site. When we look at, and it really is aligned with national information, that Black and Brown students, specifically African-American and Hispanic students, are disciplined at a higher rate than white students or Asian American students. And it shows here in Newton that that was the case as well. When we looked at last year's data, and that's the most frequent, the most updated information because they put it out in the summer after the school year has ended. It shows a couple things. It shows that here in Newton, overall, our number of students or disciplinary students who are disciplined within our out of school suspension dropped significantly from 287 to 188. Although I can't speak to the details of that, some things I would like us to consider is the shift to restorative practices, is putting things in place where students feel like they can kind of report and have these resolved or things held accountable, so that we're not resulting to things being taken into students' hands or just egregious things maybe have lessened and we're able to manage them. The other thing is, as we look at it, the Hispanic, Latinx, and African-American Black students continue to be disciplined at a higher rate disproportionately than Asian students. We did see the gap close a little bit with white students where it's fairly proportional, right? That we would want both of those percentages to be aligned. And so we did see that in the white population and also in the Hispanic Latinx, even though there's still a higher rate of disproportionality, we did see the gap close slightly where it's now a 5% difference, where a couple of years earlier, I believe, we were at about a 9% difference. So again, when we've talked about data, or at least when I started this position and there were questions about data, the data is going to take time. The numbers are going to take time. What we are trying to do is highlight the places where we are showing growth, we're experiencing growth, and we're trying to also throw in qualitative data by getting feedback from those in the district. So this does highlight a shift. It still says there's more work to be done, but it does show that at least in terms of having less students disciplined, I think that's a win for everyone across the district. I also wanted to, there was something here that I wanted to highlight. I also want to be clear that when we talk about Asian students being disciplined at a disproportionately lower or white students, we're not asking that we amp up the discipline for Asian or white students. We're asking that we are more considerate of our biases as to why we would target Black and brown students, why we may feel that their behaviors are more egregious, same behaviors that white students or other students are exhibiting. There has been a historical kind of default to think their behaviors are more egregious or need to be policed more. So the goal is actually that we are, and through some of this professional development, we're seeing Black and brown students as more human and not having that natural default or reaction. So we're not saying to penalize other students more. We're actually saying that we should have a similar representation. If only this percentage of students makes up our community, then it should be that this percentage of disciplinary actions is in line, that we are not over disciplining our Black and brown students. And the data here shows that we still are, although we are making some shifts. But again, this is data that is consistent across the country, not specific to Newton. We also want to just again survey feedback. So we were able to get some feedback from the elementary schools around the PD, the CRI focus all year. So here are just some quotes and highlights that have come from our elementary schools. Some of these are from principals or staff that have been participating. And a breakthrough this year, I think, is that we had a lot of staff say they finally feel like they were concretely implementing some of the work. I came into this district really focusing on racial identity development work and having folks do some self-reflection, instruction, and practices. And this year, the feedback did say they felt like they were able to implement some of this, and that's going to be our ongoing work of culturally responsive instruction. So we'll just some of the feedback here. Each month's meeting is built thoughtfully. Folks are feeling supported, feeling a growth and understanding. Facilitation skills are growing. Also, these PDs provide opportunity for school educators to take on leadership roles, to feel engaged in something that they're passionate about and feel valuable about something that they can teach and share with others. Folks have found it an impactful continuation of the work, and that more teachers are feeling more comfortable talking about race with their students. Also, as we implement or we continue to engage and educate our community on culturally responsive instruction, we have internally, the administrators and our professional learning community have been looking at evaluation tools and trying to assess which tool is more aligned with our work and get some feedback so we can do a full implementation of these evaluation tools. Because if we're asking educators to learn this and practice, we also want to be able to provide feedback and observe. So the two tools that we've been using and discussing all year have been in the CRIOP tool, the Culturally Responsive Instruction Observation Protocol, and also the Mass DESI optics tool. Both similar in terms of kind of the headers and the areas of culturally responsive instruction we should be focusing on, which is, warm demander, family engagement, safe learning environments, strong curriculum, mindfulness of socio-political things that are happening. So they both are aligned that way, but the ways that they are assessing educator interaction with students is slightly different. So we have been introducing this. All administrators at our admin council are familiar with both of these tools, in addition to our elementary principals and our professional learning community, which is of curriculum coordinators and some behavioral special interventionists. And next year, we're going to continue to go further and start to utilize these tools and start to give feedback. And our very last page is just some of the priorities we've highlighted for next year. Again, we're going to continue to build on what we've created here. Oh, sorry. And a few more things. So you'll see here a focus on elementary affinity groups, and a wonderful partnership with COSPOC, which we'll be announcing very soon. Continue to build our evaluation tools, our gender guidance work, which has been an ask across the district for some time now for gender affirming practices and instruction and support for our students, and continued ongoing staff development. And also in addition, student feedback as we continue to gauge staff feedback.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
That was chock full of good information. Appreciate it. Questions from the members? Open it up. Mayor Fuller.
I want to start with a huge thank you to both of you and to the huge teams that you've created. On the city side, we use you as a role model for thinking about both internally within our employee groups, and then as we engage with customers and residents and services. And we have lots to still learn from you. I want to just make sure anybody who hasn't thought about what they're doing early Wednesday morning, consider joining us, because again, we're trying to very much be aligned with the important work that MPS is doing, and this idea of community engagement and education. There's a mayor's breakfast, and we're going to hear from lots of student voices. We're going to honor 3 students, but we're also, the keynote speaker is Adrian Mims, who is the founder and amazing thinker behind and in front of the Calculus Project, as well as you were kind to include the wellness initiative that we're doing. There's an amazing person. She happens to be on the city staff, but she really is NPS. Ruth Hashino is being honored as well. And she's so a part of this NPS community that reach out to me if you don't have a ticket yet. I think there's still, so we'll make room we'll crowd in at the tables a little bit more. So invite you and thank you for your help.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Fuller. Other members, questions, comments? Okay. Oh, go ahead, Rajiv.
Couple of questions. Some should be really quick. The first is around the non-discrimination protocol. We've at least anecdotally seen a significant and I think sustained spike in anti-Semitism, certainly at the high school level. I think also, is that categorized under race or under religion?
It would be categorized, I believe, under religion.
Okay.
Yes. So we had reported, I think 4 or 5 reports came in regarding anti-Semitic incidents in schools. I can also say that this tracking did not exist prior, so I can't really speak to the increase in terms of reporting. I think nationally we're aware there just has been a collective increase in anti-Semitic acts, and we have been working with a lot of this is happening in the middle schools. So we have been working closely with both middle schools. We had a forum with the Brown community and had parents come on to try to support parents in talking to their students about some of what's happening. Been working with both high schools around this too. So there is an intentional effort to respond and do our best to address these incidents.
And then the other question, which you may not have the answers for, I saw that the breakout of where incidents take place is roughly 1/3 at each level. Do you have a sense of the severity? And I know it's qualitative and can be squishy in terms of data.
Yes.
But be helpful to understand, like, is it to what extent are we talking about potentially unintentional statements that caused harm versus kind of out and out graffiti that was very much intended to cause harm, right? Not necessarily equal things, but what do we know about what's happening?
Right. So I also want to say, before I answer your question, I can answer your question, is that as we continue to roll this out, there are things we're learning about the process. And things that we need to adjust or to be able to better capture what's happening. So for elementary schools, we have some schools and we have some principals who have put this into practice and report out. We have some elementary schools that haven't reported anything out, right? So there is some inconsistency around the reporting with elementary schools that doesn't necessarily exist with the secondary schools. A lot in every report that comes in, and these are initial, they're not all substantiated, but a good percentage of them are substantiated. There's also a follow-up with an investigation and findings. We get alerted. I read through every single report that comes out. At the elementary school, they're often kids using words or calling them certain animals, or this rhymes with this, or, you know, singing a song that is really offensive. So we want to make sure that people understand that this does not go into any type of disciplinary report. If it's egregious enough, the police are involved and we handle it as we would. But we are not using this for discipline or for punishment. We're using this to gather information and create a culture where this is happening less. So for elementary schools, it really is about kids teasing. There are some that are very egregious, or my father says that people look like those types of things anecdotally, but sometimes it's, you know, students not even necessarily understanding, they overheard it. So we take those opportunities to bring parents in, to help students understand why that's not okay. Maybe some class lessons about, you know, and they're all developmentally appropriate, because something happening in second grade can be very different from 5th grade. They don't come in often in second grade or kindergarten or anything like that. Mostly hovering third and up, but they're not direct, blatant, intentional attacks. I can tell you that that does not minimize the harm received from the person who is receiving it, whether it was intentional or not. These are students who know now to go to a teacher and say this happened. And from personal experience, I never had that growing up. So I think it's also about creating a space where all students can feel like they're honored and respected, and there's a place to go if harm has happened. So I can say at the elementary level, they generally are kind of about kids pushing and not fully understanding the breadth of the harm, which we're responding to that piece.
That's helpful. And of course, the ones we get alerts about way too frequently are not the ones at the elementary schools, but,
right.
But again, the graffiti, the actual aggressive incidents,
yes.
or where it's very direct. The students are certainly at an age where they're not just blindly repeating something. So
right.
Do we have a sense of how frequently that's happening, where we stand in terms of peer communities or Massachusetts as a whole? Again, you may not have that data, but it's helpful to understand.
Yes, I don't have any comparative data. I do know at the high schools, they are more egregious, they are graffiti. Still, that gives us information about kind of how does mental health play a role in this and how we should respond. Sometimes still children, like they're still children, they don't necessarily understand the impact. The ones that are more egregious, the deans do step in and handle it as needed. We always want to prioritize the safety of the person or those who are targeted, and also use them as what would feel like the most appropriate response. So part of this restorative process is that we're not just deciding without the input and the voice of those who are saying this happened to me. So when parents say, this is not okay, this happened to my child, we bring them in and say, what would be helpful? And for the most part, parents are like, no, that works. I want the child to kind of understand why that was harmful. Maybe I want to have a conversation with their parents. It's very rare that we have parents saying like, kick them out or do this. And again, that is the culture we want to create. We want folks to not be afraid to report. We want folks to be able to say this happened and there be a process. I think that the stuff that is happening at elementary feels like, again, developmentally elementary needs more education. The stuff happening at middle school developmentally is students testing. And sometimes that has more to do with kind of what's going on for them and what kind of power control issues they're trying to exert. And I think at the high school that they tend to be a bit more harmful, a bit more provocative. And we do respond to those, again, prioritizing the safety of those who are harmed. And sometimes that does mean out of school suspension. Sometimes it does mean police involvement, but that is never our ultimate goal.
I have other questions, but I'm going to hold off.
Thank you. Since we're deep into the meeting, and others might want to go. Thanks, Rajiv. Go ahead, Emily.
Rajiv actually asked my question, so thank you for that. Just two other quick things. One is, having seen all 3 years and the sort of the trajectory of your annual report, it's amazing the work that you do, and just to see the scope and the increase and the so many different areas that you are now involved in, which is wonderful and amazing. So thank you for that. I'm also in particular very much looking forward to getting more information, not necessarily now, because I know that this is something for next year, about the gender affirming work. So I'll be very interested to hear more about that next year.
Absolutely. There's lots of intention and planning that has been happening. So we'll be ready. Yeah.
Thank you, Emily. Go ahead, Kathy.
Super quickly, thank you for doing this work. It's just so important, and I'm so glad that you both are here. Just a quick question about in your priorities for next year, COSABOC. I feel like I've heard something about it, but I've forgotten what it is. Can you give us 30 seconds?
Yes, it's the Coalition of Schools
Educating Boys of Color.
Yes. So they officially started in Philly. I'm sorry, what?
That's a grant we won?
So yes. So COSBOC has been around. They do a lot of programming. They originally started in Philly, but they do programming in Massachusetts. I've been familiar with them for years. They offered an application process to become a Vanguard district. So we did apply, and the application really asked questions about how embedded is DEI work in your community, but they were specific, and we are the only district to, it was between 1 or 2 districts that they were going to finalize, and they did confirm we're the only district that received the Vanguard, we're the recipients in the inaugural Vanguard district, which means that they have a lot of funding that's been supported through, I forget, the Facebook. The 2 big organizations that folks will be familiar with have funded them enough that they can introduce some of their training in our schools, specifically targeting boys of color, because we know when we look at the data, that is the group that needs the most attention. So they are currently partnering with the DEI department, and we have a small advisory too, representative of the district. A press release is going to be coming out. We have an MOU. We have folks to participate in the Standards training. It's really exciting stuff. It's just a lot to throw into this meeting, but I did want to highlight that we were chosen as the Vanguard district, and their biggest draw to us was the different ways that this work was embedded in different communities. They thought there were so many structures to support it, and that was really appealing to them.
So that's just adding on to Kathy. It'll be really amazing to continue a partnership with them, or to start partnership, I should say, because they're also focused on the greater community and Newton as a whole. So it won't just be focused on the schools, but bringing in other constituencies, which will be really exciting work.
Thank you, Kathy. So seeing no other.
Very quick, and I don't think the answers exist yet.
Go ahead.
So one of the things I think I'd mentioned earlier that I would love to see is a breakdown of retention numbers. So again, anecdotally, it sounds like we are doing a good job hiring highly qualified educators of color. Fantastic. Are we retaining them? Right.
Right.
And in general, Newton has high retention rates.
Right.
But to the extent you can get a breakdown, that would be helpful because it's a validation of whether everything else around retention is working or not. So
Yes.
that would be helpful. And then again, the other thing that would be helpful to understand, and I know you don't have this right now, is in terms of supporting students with disabilities.
Mhm.
Because one of the challenges that I know I've seen firsthand is that sometimes it's hard for those students to even tell that they're being discriminated against, or that they, what they're hearing from other students is intended to cause hurt. Right. So there are a different set of challenges there, but they're very real in our schools and harder to tackle in some ways than something that's very overt.
Yes.
But would love to hear the next time you come in and see us, which will hopefully not be a full year from now, to hear more about how you're thinking about that.
Sure. And I'd actually just want to comment on that because that's another piece of sometimes these reports that come in. We do find, and we're not able to offer this information, this private information, but sometimes some of this, the statements or the discrimination reports do involve students with disabilities, and developmentally, how do we support those students to really understand the harm, because the intention isn't there, but it is a reaction of their disability or manifestation of their disability. We have also CPAC has been working with us this year to really consider the neurodivergent community. And if any of you caught the community forum, we were very specific about including that as part of the intersectionality of our work. Also, Assistant Superintendent of Student Services, Casey, and I, and Student Services also partnered in that community forum too. And that was deliberate to include the neurodivergent community and the special education community. We are also looking at educating our community on ableism and bringing that into the fold of our DEI work. So that is something that's actually happening right now.
Thank you, Rajiv. And just to close out this conversation, you took my question on retention rates for staff of color, but I do note that you mentioned it in your presentation. You said that it was stable.
It's not falling off, right? So although it might seem like slight increases, we're not seeing decreases. In addition, with some of the budget, we all know as we have all these efforts to hire staff of color, UNC staff of color, they sometimes are the first to go when we have cuts. So that has been a battle for the last couple of years too, with our intention to bring folks on and then not being able to hold them, not because of them, but because of our systems and structures. So I just want to acknowledge that's a piece too.
So that statement being true, that's actually where I was going with focusing on retention rates for staff of color, given that we've been through this very difficult budget cycle and that we've reduced employees by some 40 FTE positions or so. That's where I was going.
Yes.
So I'd love for us to follow up on that the next time you ladies return to the seats that you're currently sitting in for the first time, shockingly. I think I just want to close out this presentation by saying that this your packet of materials here was visually stunning and very captivating in the format that it was presented, and intensely consolidated and rich in the information that it provided. Deliberately speaking to both of you because Naomi, I think the work that you do is just so nuanced, and you spoke of intersections, and the fact that you have embedded DEI in so many aspects of the work that we've done here at the Newton Public Schools, and really promoted that as a central tenet to what makes this district excellent, and showcasing that excellence in your own work, I think is fabulous. I hope you return very soon, and I thank you for being here tonight. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we have one more item at this very, very late hour on tonight's agenda. That is an update on negotiations with our union. Vice Chair Kathy Shields, Vice Chair Kathy Shields, who is our lead on negotiations and very much appreciated there, will give the update on behalf of the negotiation subcommittee for the NTA, NISA, and the custodians. Kathy?
So you have some slides in your materials. I'm not going to read the slides to you. A number of them are very similar to some of the prior updates we've given. I think in terms of key updates for the community at this stage, the school committee is negotiating with its 3 unions. We have the Newton Teachers Association, the NTA, the Newton Educational Secretaries Association, or NESA, and our custodians union. The custodians contract expires at the end of June, and our contracts with the NTA and NESA expire at the end of August. We have been negotiating with all 3 unions for a little bit of time now. With the NTA, we started negotiating last October. With NESA, we started negotiating in February, and we've had 1 meeting with the custodians in April. The kinds of things we negotiate with all 3 of our unions are pretty similar. Working conditions, terms and conditions of their employment, various aspects of their salary and benefits and obligations. I think one of the things that has more recently gotten some public attention, so I'll spend a little bit of time talking about it, are the shared goals we have with our unions to recognize the need to support students' social and emotional well-being and their mental health as critical components of their academic growth. I think we all have come to understand very much in recent years how much a student's ability to learn is tied to how they're performing socially and emotionally and just health-wise. So I wanted to talk just a little bit about how we put into place in our schools mental health, social and emotional learning, and behavioral supports. Each school has a constellation of positions, including school psychologists, social workers, SEL coaches, and interventionists, who we heard a lot about a couple of meetings ago, as well as BCBAs, behavioral therapists, adjustment counselors, and school counselors. And all of these positions work together to support students' behavioral and mental health needs. They work together as members of a school-based team, and the number of staff and the number of positions we have at each school is determined very deliberately based on both the size of the school and the nature of the needs of the students in that school. And it's primarily for that reason that the school committee believes that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to providing mental health staffing at each of our schools, that you could, instead of saying something like you should have 1 of X and 2 of Y, that the right way to go about this approach is really to say, who are the students in this school? What are their needs? And what's the team of people that will best support those students? There are also a lot of district level resources in addition to school-based resources, including the elementary stabilization and support programs and other district programs where students who are in crisis can temporarily come out of their home schools, go to these programs, and then return when they're ready. This work also goes along with the district's ongoing work to improve our multi-tiered systems of support in all of our schools. And so from a collective bargaining perspective, to the extent you are hearing about requirements or requests that there be X number of this position at a particular school and Y number of this position at a particular school, we think that's something that's not particularly attuned to a contractual requirement, but rather an examination flexibly over time how we provide those kinds of services to our students. The other thing that I would say is that we've now gotten through our FY24 budget. The school committee has approved a budget. That budget results in slightly over 40 FTE reductions. And that has a big impact on us and on our schools and on the staff who are losing positions. And we understand that. In determining how we negotiate and how we establish offers we can make to our unions about salary and benefits and other terms of employment that interact with salary and benefits, we as a bargaining team are very mindful of the fact that we've had to make cuts and the direct correlation that exists between the number of employees we can afford to have and the compensation and benefits we provide to them. So that is always something that's top of mind for us. I think that's where I'll stop. If anyone has any particular questions, there's a lot of information in the slides, most of which you've seen before, but I'm happy to answer any questions about where we are or anything that's been topics of public discussion.
I see no questions. Thank you, Kathy. Always wonderful to have you give those updates. You do a very good job of summarizing well. The one thing I'll say is that I know there is discussion about having a landing page on the NPS website where we can put all of these updates so that the members of the public can follow along and really be kept updated on where we are in terms of our bargaining and our negotiations and just our philosophies in general going into our collective bargaining season. Contracts, words are failing me.
The other thing I'd say is for anyone who's curious, our current contracts are on our website. So anyone who wants to read the current versions of any of our contracts can just find them on our website under the collective bargaining area.
Great. Thank you very much. Last call, seeing none. Okay, with that, we have concluded the posted business for tonight's meeting. Our next regularly scheduled meeting will be on Monday, June 12th. We will have a literacy update, an update from the Special Education Parent Advisory Council, CPAC, as well as a review of the Franklin School Education and Enrollment Plan. Thanks to everyone who attended tonight's meeting and to our staff for wonderful and detailed updates and presentation. We very much appreciate it. Our meeting is now adjourned. Have a good night, everyone.